It began on a night that seemed heavier than others. Not darker, not colder, just heavier, as though the stars had gathered closer to the earth, pressing their light upon the quiet streets. Morty lay in bed, covers tangled at his knees, eyes too awake for his age. His heart felt restless, though he couldn't say why. The curtains breathed softly in the breeze, and through them Morty caught a shimmer. Not the usual blink of stars, not the red sweep of an airplane, but something still. He pushed the fabric aside with a small, clumsy hand, pressing his forehead against the glass. That was when he saw the first head. It floated above the rooftops, immense and silent. A face larger than houses, eyes wide but not unkind. Its mouth was closed, yet the night seemed to hum with its presence. Morty's breath caught in his chest. He should have been afraid. A boy ought to have screamed or run to his parents, but Morty only leaned closer, nose fogging the glass, eyes widening in awe. There were more of them, drifting from the edges of the sky. Heads upon heads, colossal and unblinking, sliding through the dark as if carried by a tide only they could feel. Their skin glowed faintly, pale as moonlight, and their eyes seemed not to look at Morty exactly, but through him, into something he could not name. Morty whispered, "Hello?" as if speaking to a friend who had always been there. Across the house, no one stirred. The walls held the soft breathing of his family in sleep. But somewhere in the garage, light flickered. Rick was awake, of course. He sat hunched at his cluttered workbench, a bottle tipped sideways near his elbow, a stack of papers spread beneath the glow of a dim lamp. His pen scratched across a worn notebook, filling it with not only equations and diagrams, but sketches, faces, circles with eyes, drawn again and again. Rick muttered to himself as he worked. Not harshly, not impatiently. His voice rose and fell like the hum of a lullaby. Equations whispered, fragments of words, half-songs from a man who would never admit he sang at all. If anyone had listened closely, they might have heard a rhythm, the way a parent hums without knowing, carrying comfort into the air. Morty slipped out of bed, bare feet against the carpet, then against the colder tiles of the hall. He moved quietly, not wanting to wake anyone, not even sure why he was walking. The heads pulled at him, their presence a gentle tug like a tide beneath the skin. The garage door was cracked open. A line of amber light stretched across the floor. Morty pushed it with slow fingers, peeking inside. Rick did not look up right away. He just kept scribbling, eyes flicking between the notebook and the faint glow of instruments that blinked like sleepy eyes themselves. Morty crept closer, gaze falling on the open page. He saw the sketches and round faces, wide eyes. Some were serene, others stern, but all were familiar. "Rick?" Morty whispered. Rick's pen paused. He turned slowly, eyes tired but sharp. "Morty, you should be asleep." "I saw them," Morty said. His voice trembled, not with fear, but with the awe of a boy who has stumbled into something vast. "The heads. They're outside." Rick studied him for a long moment. No sarcasm, no sharp retort. Just silence. Then he sighed, setting the pen down. "Yeah, they're out there." Morty stepped closer, staring at the notebook. "Why do you draw them?" Rick's gaze softened in a way Morty rarely saw. He reached out, resting a heavy oil-stained hand over the page, as though to shield it. "Because, Morty, they don't judge us. They remember us. Every mistake, every kindness. Every time we fall asleep thinking no one noticed. They notice. They keep it," Morty swallowed. "They're not scary." "Not to you," Rick murmured. He leaned back in his chair, eyes flicking toward the thin slit of night visible through the garage window. "They've been around longer than anything we can measure. Some people say they're gods. Some say they're just faces in the void. Doesn't matter. What matters is how you feel when you see them." Morty thought about that. He glanced again at the window, at the faint glow beyond. His chest felt warm, heavy, but not painful. "I felt like they were watching over me." Rick chuckled quietly, the sound tired but not cruel. "That's one way to put it. They don't tell us much. Just drift, just hum." And indeed, the garage seemed to hum with something low, almost inaudible. Morty tilted his head. "Do you hear that?" Rick nodded. "Yeah, been hearing it for years." They sat together in silence. Morty on a small stool, Rick slouched in his chair, the notebook open between them. Time thinned, stretched. The hum of the heads outside wove into the buzzing of machines, into the slow rhythm of Morty's breath. Eventually, Morty's eyes grew heavy. He rested his cheek against the edge of the bench. "Rick, will they always be there?" Rick hesitated. His mouth opened, then closed. Finally, he muttered, "As long as you remember them, Morty, that's enough." Morty's breathing slowed. His lashes fluttered. Sleep tugged at him gently, carrying him down into dreams where the heads floated endlessly, patient as the tide. Rick watched him for a long while, the boy's small hand resting near the open pages of his notebook. He sighed, took a sip from the bottle, and closed the book carefully. His eyes drifted once more toward the window. The heads were still there, silent, vast, remembering. Rick whispered, softer than he would ever admit, "Don't forget us either." And outside, in the deep cradle of night, the stars leaned closer still. Morning arrived quietly, though it did not feel like morning should. The house stirred with the ordinary sounds of breakfast, clinking plates, Beth humming faintly as she poured coffee, Summer shuffling down the hall with sleep still in her eyes. Yet for Morty, everything had shifted. The night before had left an imprint in him, soft but deep, like the outline of a dream that lingers long after waking. The cosmic heads were still there in his mind. Their stillness, their gaze, the hum that seemed to echo inside his chest. He had told himself it might vanish with the sun, but it hadn't. Even as he buttered toast and avoided Jerry's chatter about coupons, Morty felt the weight of being seen by something too large to measure. Rick sat at the end of the table, unshaven, hair askew, eyes red but sharp. He grumbled at Beth when she reminded him not to leave chemicals in the sink again, but mostly he stayed quiet. He sipped from a mug that smelled faintly metallic, not like coffee, and occasionally glanced at Morty as though he knew what the boy was holding back. After breakfast, Morty slipped away. He wasn't sure where his feet were taking him until he realized he was back at the garage. The air inside still carried the faint hum from last night, though perhaps it was only in his memory. On the workbench sat Rick's notebook. It looked ordinary enough, frayed leather cover, corners curled, a faint stain of something spilled long ago. But Morty knew it wasn't ordinary at all. He felt drawn to it, the way he'd felt pulled to the window, pulled to the heads. He hesitated only a moment before reaching out. The leather was cool under his fingertips. He opened it carefully, as though the pages might crumble or flare to life. Inside were sketches, dozens, maybe hundreds, circles, faces, endless variations of the same immense heads that had filled the sky. Some were serene, some frowning, some drawn with heavy dark lines as though anger had pressed the pen too hard. Between them were symbols Morty didn't recognize, equations, fragments of alien languages, notes scrawled in Rick's hurried hand. Morty traced a finger over one of the drawings. The eyes seemed alive, staring back. His chest tightened. "What do you think you're doing, Morty?" Morty jumped, slamming the book shut. Rick stood in the doorway, hands shoved into the pockets of his lab coat, gaze sharp but not furious. He looked more tired than angry. I was just..." Morty stammered. Rick walked forward slowly, taking the notebook into his hands. He didn't snatch it, just lifted it away with deliberate calm. For a long moment he said nothing, flipping the book open and closed as if deciding what to reveal. Then finally he sighed. "You saw them last night," Rick said. Not a question. Morty nodded. His throat was dry. "Yeah, I couldn't sleep. I looked out the window and they were there, just looking." Rick's eyes flicked up, studying Morty. "And how'd you feel?" Morty hesitated. "I wasn't scared. I thought I would be, but it was more like they were watching over me. Like they cared." Rick gave a quiet laugh, low and without mockery. "That's the first mistake everybody makes. They don't care, Morty. Not the way we think. They don't interfere. They don't fix things. They don't hand out blessings like candy. They just remember." "Remember," Morty echoed. Rick tapped the notebook. "Yeah, they carry memory. Not just ours, but everything's. Every choice, every laugh, every time someone whispers into the dark thinking no one hears. They keep it. Doesn't matter if you're a king or a kid trying to fall asleep. The heads don't forget." Morty swallowed. His gaze lingered on the closed book. "So why do you draw them?" Rick was silent for a long time. He pulled out the nearest stool, sat down heavily and ran a hand through his hair. "Because, Morty, when you've seen as much as I've seen, you need to put it somewhere. Equations won't hold it. Machines won't hold it. Sometimes the only thing that makes sense is to sketch the same damn face 1,000 times until you believe it's real. Morty lowered himself onto the stool beside him. But they are real. I saw them. Rick turned, meeting his eyes. For once there was no sarcasm, no sharp edge. Yeah, Morty, you did, and you'll keep seeing them. Once they find you, they don't stop. The words should have frightened him, but Morty only felt calm. Like being wrapped in a blanket you didn't know you needed. Rick opened the notebook again, flipping to a page filled with both equations and little lines of text. He pointed to one scribble. This one says they don't judge us, Morty. They remember us. I wrote that after the first time I saw them. Woke up in a cold sweat, thought it was just booze and sleep deprivation. But no. The more I saw them, the more I realized they weren't here to scare me. They were here to remind me. Remind you of what? Morty asked softly. Rick leaned back, staring at the ceiling. That nothing is wasted. Not even the worst of us. Every stumble, every failure, every quiet kindness. It all gets carried. Even if no one else notices, Morty let the words settle. He thought about his own small life. Mistakes at school. Arguments with Summer. The times he wanted to be brave but wasn't. He thought about the way the heads had looked at him. Or through him. And for the first time he felt less ashamed. The garage was quiet for a while, filled only with the hum of machines and the faint turning of notebook pages. Morty leaned against the bench, eyelids heavy again, but this time not from exhaustion, from peace. Rick closed the book, resting it gently in his lap. Don't go telling your dad about this, Morty. He'll try to sell the story to a magazine or turn it into a speech about family values. Just keep it here. Between us, Morty smiled faintly. Okay, Rick. Rick glanced at him, lips twitching at the edges of something almost like a smile. He set the notebook aside, stood and patted Morty's shoulder. Come on. Beth'll have a fit if she finds you hiding out in here again. Let's get some fresh air. They stepped outside together. The sun was high, ordinary and warm. The sky was empty, no trace of the heads. Yet Morty knew, in some deeper way, that they were still there, just beyond sight, holding the memory of everything. As they walked back toward the house, Morty whispered to himself, "They remember us." Rick didn't answer. He just looked at the boy for a moment, eyes softer than usual, and then let the silence say everything. And in that silence, Morty felt something he hadn't felt before. Not safety, not exactly. Not certainty. But a strange kind of belonging, as though the universe itself had carved a small place for him, and promised not to let it vanish. The notebook remained in the garage, closed, but alive, waiting for the next set of memories to be sketched upon its pages. It was an ordinary afternoon in the Smith household, though Morty had stopped believing in the word ordinary. Ever since the night of the heads, even the most familiar moments carried a strange softness, as though some invisible thread ran through them, tying breakfast sunlight and the sound of footsteps to the vast silence he had seen in the sky. Beth was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, humming as she unpacked groceries. The clatter of jars and the sharp crinkle of bags filled the air. Morty sat at the table, chin propped on his hands, eyes distant. He hadn't told her about the heads, not yet. Some part of him wanted to keep them safe, like a secret that could dissolve if shared too soon. "Morty, want a sandwich?" Beth asked absently, pulling bread from a bag. Yeah. "Sure, Mom." His voice sounded far away, even to himself. She began layering bread, lettuce, cheese, and something Morty didn't recognize. A jar with no label filled with pale, cloud-colored spread that seemed to glow faintly in the afternoon light. She spread it across the bread with slow care. The texture was impossibly light, like whipped mist. Morty blinked. "What's that stuff?" Beth smiled faintly, the way a parent does when they don't have an answer ready. It came with the groceries. Some kind of whipped topping, I guess. Smells sweet, doesn't it? Rick shuffled into the kitchen then, still wearing his lab coat, his hair even more unkempt than usual. His eyes landed on the jar immediately. "Beth, where'd you get that?" She frowned. "It was in the bag with the lettuce." "Probably some new brand. Why?" Rick snatched the jar from the counter, holding it to the light. He twisted the lid open, sniffed deeply, then muttered to himself, "Figures." "Head residue." Beth rolled her eyes. "Head residue? Really, Rick?" Morty sat up straighter. "Wait, what? You mean from them?" Rick didn't answer right away. He dipped a finger into the spread, placed a dab on his tongue and grimaced. Yep, that's them. Condensed or leaked or whatever. Don't ask me for details, Morty. Cosmic secretion. The important part is, it's harmless. Sort of. Beth shook her head, muttering, if it's harmless, then fine. Morty needs to eat. She finished the sandwich, sliding the plate in front of him. Morty stared at it. The bread looked soft, the lettuce crisp, the spread pale as clouds at dawn. He picked it up carefully and took a bite. The moment the sandwich touched his tongue, the kitchen vanished. He was standing in a field of white sky, air sweet and cool, the ground soft as mist. Above him floated the head, silent and vast, drifting slowly across the horizon. The flavor in his mouth carried the weight of memory and distance, of something endless and kind. His body felt lighter, as though the gravity that held him had loosened. Morty blinked. He was back in the kitchen, sandwich halfway to his mouth, Beth sipping coffee across the counter. Rick was watching him with a knowing smirk. You felt it, didn't you, Morty? Rick said quietly. Morty swallowed. The taste lingered, delicate and strange. I was there again, with them. Beth looked confused. What is he talking about? Rick waved a hand. Forget it, Beth. Just call it vitamins. Special vitamins from the universe. But Morty knew it wasn't just vitamins. His chest felt stretched, as though invisible threads pulled him in a dozen directions. Toward the heads, toward his mother, toward Rick, toward something bigger than all of them. He took another bite. Again the kitchen melted away. This time he stood on a high hill, clouds rolling beneath his feet, the sky so wide it seemed endless. The heads hummed softly, not with words but with presence, and Morty felt his body bend toward them, just slightly, like a tree leaning into wind. When he returned again, he pressed the sandwich to the plate, heart pounding gently. Rick, what's happening to me? Rick scratched the back of his neck, leaning against the counter. You're stretching, Morty. Not your bones, not your muscles, you. It's empathy. You eat that stuff, you feel them more. It pulls you. You bend toward what you love, what you notice, what hurts. Weirdest side effect in the multiverse, Morty frowned. So, every time I feel sad for someone or happy with someone, I'll bend. Pretty much. Rick shrugged. Don't worry, it won't kill you, probably. Beth set down her mug, narrowing her eyes. Rick, if this is dangerous... It's not, Rick interrupted. Then softer. Not in the way you think. Morty sat silently, fingers tracing the crust of the sandwich. The taste lingered in his mouth, airy and sweet, like memory itself. He thought about the way his body had tilted toward the heads, the way he wanted to lean toward his mom now, to tell her everything. But he didn't. Not yet. Later, after the kitchen cleared, Morty carried the half-eaten sandwich out to the backyard. The sky was pale blue, clouds drifting lazily. He lay in the grass, staring upward, and took one more bite. This time the vision was smaller. He wasn't in the sky or the hills, but standing in his own yard, only emptier, quieter. Above him floated a single head, watching. Its gaze was steady, unreadable. Morty felt his knees buckle slightly. As though bowing, he whispered, "Why me?" The head did not answer, but the hum grew louder, vibrating through his chest, filling him with something he could only call recognition. When the vision faded, Morty lay back against the grass. The sandwich was gone, only crumbs on his plate. His body felt strange, looser, lighter, but not weak. His arms ached slightly, as if they had been stretched toward the sky. Rick came outside, hands in his coat pockets. He looked down at Morty, then at the empty plate. "Yeah," he said softly, almost to himself. "That's how it starts." Morty closed his eyes. The clouds above seemed closer, almost within reach. He wondered if one day he could stretch far enough to touch them, and somewhere in the vastness beyond the blue, the heads drifted silently, keeping memory. Carrying even this moment, a boy in the grass, crumbs on his plate, a heart leaning toward the sky. Morty had always thought of the garage as a kind of forbidden cave. It wasn't that Rick told him not to go there. Rick was too busy for rules like that. But something about the air inside always made Morty hesitate. It smelled of oil and ozone, of machines that didn't belong to the world outside. It was cluttered in ways no one could ever clean, wires dangling like vines, jars stacked like half-forgotten memories, glowing tools humming faintly in the dark. That night, curiosity tugged at him. The sandwich that tasted like clouds still lingered in his stomach, making his body feel just a little too light, a little too bendable. The heads had not appeared again, but their silence pressed softly against him as though waiting. And so while the house was quiet and Beth had retreated to her room, Morty pushed the garage door open. The moment he stepped inside, he froze. There were voices, not loud, not clear, but whispers, sliding along the walls. They didn't belong to anyone he knew. They rose and fell like distant conversations, sometimes overlapping, sometimes fading away into nothing. Morty glanced around, heart quickening, but there was no one there. Only shelves of alien gadgets, Rick's workbench glowing faintly, and the endless shadows where boxes leaned against one another like tired travelers, he whispered. Hello? The voices stilled. Then softly they began again, as though responding to his presence. Morty stepped deeper inside. Each footfall echoed faintly, but his footsteps were not the only sound. The whispers seemed to bend around him, weaving into the space. Some were high-pitched, some low, but none of them sharp or frightening. They were sad, maybe, or patient. He moved toward Rick's workbench, where the notebook still lay open, filled with half equations, half sketches of the heads. He brushed his fingers across the pages. The whispers grew louder, filling his ears like the rustling of trees. And then behind him Rick spoke. You hear them, don't you? Morty spun around. Rick was standing in the doorway, a silhouette framed by the dim hall light. He stepped inside slowly, the door hissing shut behind him. His eyes glinted with something Morty couldn't name. Not just curiosity, not just tiredness. What are they, Rick? Morty asked. His voice was small. Rick walked past him, grabbing a tool from the bench. Echoes, Morty, that's all. Just echoes, Morty frowned. Echoes of what? Rick paused, then sighed. Memories looking for a place to land. The words hung in the air like smoke. Morty blinked, trying to understand. You mean, they're people? Rick shook his head. Not people, exactly. Impressions, fragments. The universe is too big to keep everything inside it neat and tidy. Some things spill over. Sometimes they get stuck in places like this. Garages, caves, empty rooms. They don't hurt anyone, they just... Wait, Morty shivered. The voices brushed past his ears, light as feathers. What are they waiting for? Rick didn't answer right away. He was fiddling with a strange device, twisting wires, adjusting dials. Finally he muttered, someone to listen maybe, or someone to remember, or maybe nothing at all. Sometimes echoes don't want to be anything more than echoes. Morty stood still, his body leaning slightly toward the sound. His chest ached with the same stretching pull he had felt since the sandwich. He thought about the heads drifting above the sky, silent but full of memory. He thought about his mom humming in the kitchen. He thought about Rick, always hiding feelings in the cracks of his words. They sound sad, Morty whispered. Rick gave a half smile that didn't reach his eyes. That's because you're sad, Morty. Echoes just bounce back what's already in you. Morty looked at him confused. So, I'm making them? No, you're just tuning in, like a radio that doesn't know it's a radio. Most people walk through life too noisy to notice. You're quiet enough now to hear. The words sank into Morty's chest, heavy and comforting all at once. He turned back to the shadows, listening again. The whispers rose and fell, and for a moment he thought he recognized something in them. A laugh that reminded him of summer, a sigh that sounded like his mother after a long day. Even a mutter that could have been Rick himself. He swallowed. Rick, do you ever hear them? Rick's hands stilled on the device. His shoulders shifted slightly, as though he were carrying something invisible. Yeah, Morty, all the time. His voice was quieter now, almost tender. But you get used to it. Or you drink enough not to care. Morty didn't know what to say to that. The silence that followed was filled only by the whispers, circling them like a breeze. Finally, Rick set the device down. Come on, Morty, it's late. Echoes won't go anywhere. They'll be here long after us. Morty hesitated. Can I stay a little longer? Rick studied him for a moment, then nodded. Don't lose yourself in them. Remember, they're not answers. They're just reminders. With that, Rick turned and left, the door clicking shut behind him. Morty stood alone, surrounded by voices. He closed his eyes and let the whispers wash over him. For the first time, he didn't try to understand them. He just listened. He let them bend him, stretch him, pull at the soft places inside. He thought of the heads again, their vast eyes watching without judgment. He thought of the way Rick's voice softened when he spoke of echoes. He thought of how the world, even in its strangeness, could feel so close, so alive when he simply paid attention. The whispers quieted, fading to a low hum. Morty opened his eyes. The garage looked the same, messy, cluttered, humming with unfinished inventions. But it felt different now, like it carried the weight of every memory the universe had misplaced. He stepped back toward the door, hand resting on the knob. Before leaving, he turned once more to the dark corners. "Goodnight," he whispered. The voices did not answer, but they lingered, soft as breath, as though they had heard him, as though they would remember. When Morty slipped back into bed that night, the house felt warmer. His dreams were filled not with faces or sandwiches or stars, but with a quiet chorus of voices all murmuring together, reminding him he was never really alone. Morty had started listening differently since the night of the echoes. The world felt like it was layered now, like two songs playing at once. There was the surface song, the chatter of classrooms, the clatter of shoes in the hall, the sound of lockers shutting with dull certainty. And then there was the quieter song underneath, a hum he couldn't quite name, full of fragments that pulled at him when he let his guard down. It was during one of those long afternoons at school that Morty noticed her. She sat near the back of the classroom, 2 rows over, near the window that always let in too much light. Morty couldn't remember ever hearing her speak. She didn't raise her hand, didn't argue with the teacher, didn't laugh loudly with friends. But there was something about her silence that wasn't empty. It was full. While others scribbled notes or doodled half-distracted sketches, she lifted her hands as though she were writing on the air itself. Her fingers moved carefully, tracing letters no one else could see. Morty watched her once, then again, and finally every day, until he began to realize she wasn't just playing. She was keeping something, collecting it. One day, when the final bell rang and students surged out of the classroom like waves from a broken dam, Morty lingered. His heart beat uncomfortably fast as he walked over to her desk. She didn't look up, only kept tracing shapes into the empty air. Morty began, voice awkward and soft. "What are you doing?" Her hands slowed. She turned her head toward him, not startled but curious, as though she had been waiting. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Instead, she lifted her hand, pointed toward her invisible writing, and then tapped her chest. Morty frowned. "You're writing? In the air?" She nodded once, but why? "No one can read it." She tilted her head, a small smile flickering. Then she leaned forward and whispered, barely audible, "The heads can." Morty froze. "Wait, what? You've seen them?" Her eyes widened like windows opening to the night. She nodded again, slowly this time, with gravity. He sat down in the desk beside her, breath catching. "When? How?" She lifted her hands, miming the shapes again. Her finger traced a curve, then another. Morty realized she was shaping faces. Round, open faces, like the ones that had drifted silently through his window that night. She didn't speak more, but he didn't need her to. The understanding pulsed between them like a quiet chord. From that day forward, Morty found himself drawn to her. At lunch, he sat nearby, listening to the silence she carried with her. After school, he walked with her to the edge of the playground, where she often lingered. She didn't talk, not in words. But she would lift her hands and write in the air, names, fragments of phrases, shapes that looked like half-finished lullabies. And Morty began to read them, not with his eyes, but with the stretch in his chest, the lean of his body toward hers. Once he whispered, "What do they say to you?" "The heads?" She paused, then wrote 3 words slowly, carefully in the air. "We remember you." Morty shivered. The phrase echoed Rick's quiet muttering, the words he had once said over his notebook. He wondered if the girl and Rick had both tapped into the same secret, one through equations, the other through silence. The next week she handed him something unexpected, a folded piece of paper. Inside were lines scrawled in looping handwriting. "The whispers are not lost. They are collected, like raindrops in a cup. When you listen, they rest. When you forget, they wander." Morty read it again and again, each time feeling the stretch in his chest grow softer, easier. One evening, he brought her to the garage. Rick had gone out, and the room was quiet except for the usual hum. The moment she stepped inside, her eyes closed. Morty could see it in her posture. She heard them too. The whispers swirled around her, and instead of flinching or straining to listen, She lifted her hands and wrote. The words she wrote glowed faintly in the dim light, as if the echoes had been waiting for her touch. Morty whispered, "What do they want from us?" She turned, and for the first time spoke a sentence aloud, her voice delicate and trembling. "Not from us. With us?" Her words felt like a soft bell ringing inside his chest. They stood in silence for a long time, listening together. The whispers seemed calmer now, less scattered, as though the presence of two listeners steadied them. Morty realized how rare it was to share this quiet with someone else. Rick always explained, but he never lingered. Summer teased but didn't understand. His mom filled silences with tasks. But here, with this girl, silence was enough. Later, as they left the garage, she turned to him under the dim porch light. She didn't speak, but she wrote one more phrase in the air. "Don't forget me." The letters hung invisible to the world but clear to Morty. He nodded, his voice almost breaking. "I won't." That night, lying in bed, Morty closed his eyes and replayed the memory of her hands moving through the air, collecting whispers. He thought about how the heads had drifted silently over his childhood sky, how Rick had spoken of echoes, how a simple sandwich had tasted like clouds. All of it was stringing together now, threads weaving into something larger. And for the first time since the heads appeared, Morty didn't feel alone. He whispered into the dark as if she could hear him, "I'll listen, too." And somewhere in the hum of the universe the echoes settled quietly. Content. It was late when Rick finally let himself collapse into the garage chair, head falling back, mouth half open. The empty bottles on his workbench clinked faintly as his elbow brushed against them. Morty lingered nearby, too restless to leave, too heavy-eyed to resist sleep. He'd been spending more nights like this, in the quiet, in the hum of machines, where whispers floated gently like invisible moths. At first, Morty thought he was just dozing off in the cluttered chair beside his grandfather. But then something changed. The air thickened. The low buzzing of wires melted into a soft song without words, deep and vibrating. The garage dissolved. Morty blinked, and when his eyes opened again, he was lying not on a chair, but in a wide meadow stretching endlessly beneath a violet sky. Rick was there too, standing a few feet away, coat swaying lightly though there was no wind. He looked younger, sharper, as if sleep had peeled back the tiredness clinging to him. He glanced down at Morty and muttered, "Well, looks like you got dragged into this too." Morty sat up, his chest tightening with awe. Above them floated the heads, dozens, maybe hundreds, moving slowly across the sky like massive clouds with faces. Their eyes shone faintly, not with menace but with patience, like ancient guardians humming to themselves. Morty whispered, "Rick, are we dreaming?" Rick's gaze remained fixed upward. "Yeah, Morty. Shared resonance state. Happens sometimes. The heads don't always stay up there in the real sky. Sometimes they dip into here, into whatever's underneath sleep." The ground beneath them felt alive, as though it pulsed with the song above. Morty pressed his palms to the grass and felt it hum faintly, as if tuned to the same frequency as the heads. The faces in the sky did not speak, but their presence was overwhelming. Their hum grew louder, filling Morty's chest until he thought he might split apart. He felt himself stretching again, not his limbs this time, but something deeper, something inside him that leaned toward the sound, as though pulled by invisible gravity. Rick lowered himself to sit cross-legged on the grass. For once there was no sarcasm, no muttering about science. "He just listened, Morty," he said quietly. "What you're hearing, it's not language, not the way we think of it. It's memory before memory, feeling before words, the closest thing to what's left when everything else is stripped away." Morty swallowed hard. "It feels like they know me. Like they've always known me." Rick's eyes softened, just for a moment. "Yeah, that's how they work. You don't meet the heads, you remember them." The meadow shimmered, and suddenly Morty was not sitting in grass, but standing in a field of stars. The ground beneath him glowed as though he were walking on the night sky itself. Rick was beside him, silent, eyes shining with the same starlight. The heads drifted closer. One descended lower than the others, so vast Morty could barely comprehend it. Its eyes met his, and Morty's chest filled with the sound of its hum. His knees bent as though in reverence, but he didn't feel afraid. He felt recognized. Rick's voice was quiet but steady. "Careful, Morty. They don't mean harm, but they'll show you more of yourself than you might be ready for. The head's hum deepened, and Morty's mind filled with visions. He saw himself as a child, pressing his face to the window pane on that first night. He saw Beth in the kitchen, her sandwich glowing faintly. He saw the girl writing in the air, her fingers leaving trails of whispers. And he saw Rick, not the tired man slouched over his bottles, but the one beside him now, younger, almost whole, almost gentle. Morty gasped. "Are these dreams? Memories?" Rick shook his head. "Both, neither. Could be futures, too. The heads don't care about time the way we do. They just hold it." The hum swelled, vibrating through every part of Morty's body. He felt himself pulled forward, his chest stretching so far he thought it might split into light. For a moment he wasn't Morty at all. He was the meadow, the stars, the echoes, the heads themselves. He was everything leaning toward everything. Then slowly the vision faded. The meadow returned, the violet sky stretched overhead, the heads drifting higher, further away. Morty collapsed back into the grass, breath shallow, body trembling. Rick lay beside him now, hands folded behind his head. He looked strangely calm. "Don't fight it, Morty. Let it pass through you. That's the trick." Morty's voice shook. "Rick, do you ever wonder if dreams are like memories of stuff that hasn't happened yet?" Rick chuckled softly. "Not mocking, not bitter, just quiet. All the time, Morty. But I don't try to answer it anymore. Some questions you just sit with. Let 'em hum at you. That's enough." They lay there together, the two of them, in the strange meadow of sleep. The heads drifted further into the distance, their song softening into silence. Morty's eyelids grew heavier, even inside the dream. Before everything slipped away, he heard Rick's voice again, low and almost tender. "Remember this, Morty. Not everything in the universe wants to be solved. Some of it just wants to be remembered." And then the meadow dissolved into dark, and Morty drifted deeper into sleep, the hum of the heads lingering faintly in his chest, like the echo of a lullaby. When he woke the next morning in the garage chair, the sunlight spilling across his face, Rick was still slumped beside him, snoring softly. The notebook lay open on the workbench, pages fluttering in the faint breeze from the cracked window. Morty touched the paper gently. The sketches of faces looked different now, less mysterious, more familiar. Like old friends whose names he almost remembered, he whispered to himself, "I won't forget." Outside, the morning was quiet, the world ordinary again. But somewhere in the sky, unseen, the heads drifted on, carrying the memory of one more dream. Morty didn't mean for it to happen. He never meant for any of it to happen. His body had started behaving strangely ever since the night of the sandwich, but he had convinced himself it was just imagination or a dream lingering too long. But that day, the day he saw the boy crying by the lockers, he knew it wasn't just in his head anymore. The halls of the school smelled like pencil shavings and sour milk, the way they always did. Students moved past him in noisy waves, chatter filling every corner. Morty kept his head down, books pressed against his chest, trying not to get caught in the current. That's when he noticed him, a small boy slumped against the lockers, his face buried in his arms. The others walked past without pausing, their laughter bouncing off the walls, careless. Morty slowed. He didn't know the boy, younger, maybe from a different grade, but something about the sound of his muffled sobs made Morty's chest ache. He wanted to walk away, to pretend he hadn't noticed. But his body disagreed. Before he could stop himself, he felt it, the pull. His shoulders curved, his spine bent as though invisible strings tugged him downward toward the boy. Morty's arms trembled, stretching forward without his permission, as though reaching not for the body but for the sorrow itself. He gasped, stumbling, almost dropping his books. His body leaned so far he had to catch himself on the lockers. His chest burned with a pressure that wasn't pain exactly, but closeness. Too much closeness. The boy looked up, startled. His eyes were red, his face wet. Morty's awkward half-stretch froze, and for a terrible second he thought the boy would scream or laugh or call him a freak. But instead, the boy blinked. His crying slowed. He whispered, You feel it too." Morty didn't know how to answer. He only nodded, breath shaky. The boy gave a faint, trembling smile, not joy, not relief, but recognition. Then he lowered his head again, shoulders shaking. but the sobs were softer now, less sharp. Morty's own body loosened, the stretch easing, though the ache remained like a bruise in his chest. When Morty finally pulled himself away, his arms felt heavy, like they'd carried something invisible. That evening, he told Rick, the garage smelled of smoke and strange chemicals. Rick was tinkering with a cube-shaped device that hummed faintly, glowing with shifting colors. Morty stood awkwardly near the workbench, shuffling his feet. "Rick," he began, "something weird happened today. With this kid at school." Rick didn't look up. "Define weird, Morty. Weird like frogs falling out of the sky, or weird like your hormones are finally kicking in?" Morty flushed. "No, Rick, I'm serious." He was crying. "And I felt pulled, like my body just bent toward him." "Like I couldn't help it." Rick finally looked up, eyes narrowing. He studied Morty for a long moment, then set down the cube. "Yeah," Rick muttered. "Knew this was coming." Morty frowned. "What do you mean you knew?" "What's happening to me?" Rick sighed, rubbing his temples. "You're not just hearing echoes anymore, Morty. You're echoing yourself, stretching toward other people's pain, their joy, whatever they're radiating. Empathy, Morty. Pure, unfiltered empathy. Most people bury it under sarcasm or noise, but your body doesn't give you that option." Morty swallowed hard. "So every time someone's sad, I'll feel it? So I'll stretch?" Rick shrugged. "Pretty much. It's not a curse, Morty. It's just inconvenient." "Inconvenient?" Morty echoed. "Rick, it's embarrassing. What if everyone sees?" Rick smirked faintly. "Welcome to being alive, Morty. Everybody's embarrassed. You just show it differently." Morty sank into the chair opposite him, burying his face in his hands. "I don't want this, Rick. I don't want to bend every time somebody cries." Rick was silent for a while. The cube on the table pulsed gently, filling the silence with its rhythm. Finally, Rick spoke, softer now. "Oh, you think I wanted what I've got? The brain that doesn't shut up. The equations that never stop multiplying. We don't get to pick, Morty. We just make do." Morty looked up slowly. Rick's face was unreadable, but his eyes held something unspoken, something fragile. "Empathy's rare," Rick continued. "Dangerous, too, in its own way. But it's also necessary. The universe doesn't run on equations alone. Somebody's got to bend when others break." The words sank into Morty like stones in water. He thought of the boy at school, the way his sobs had softened when Morty leaned toward him. He thought of the girl who collected whispers, her silent letters shimmering in the air. He thought of the heads, vast and silent, bending only to memory. Morty whispered, "So I'm supposed to help people? Just by stretching?" Rick shrugged again, but his voice was gentler. "Maybe. Or maybe you're just supposed to listen. Not everything needs saving, Morty. Sometimes it just needs company." Morty nodded slowly, though the ache in his chest remained. That night, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling. His body still felt strange, stretched and sore, as though the sadness he had carried wasn't entirely gone. He thought about what Rick had said, about company, about bending where others broke. Closing his eyes, Morty let his mind drift. He pictured the boy at the lockers, the girl at her desk, the whispers in the garage. He pictured the heads, floating silently across a sky that belonged to no one. And as sleep pulled him under, he whispered to the dark, "I'll bend if I have to." Outside, the night was quiet. But somewhere in the distance, too faint for anyone else to hear, the heads hummed softly, carrying his promise into the folds of the cosmos. Rick didn't usually bother with teachers. He mocked them, rolled his eyes at their methods, and insisted that knowledge was best stolen, not taught. But on one of those rare days when the portal gun's glow felt softer, he brought Morty to someone he called an old star mapper. The portal opened onto a quiet hill beneath a pale lavender sky. Strange constellations glimmered above, their shapes unfamiliar to Morty's earth-trained eyes. The air carried a faint hum, like the echo of a lullaby sung too far away to hear clearly. At the top of the hill sat a figure, robed in fabric that shimmered with shifting constellations. The fabric itself seemed to breathe, pulsing with soft light as though it held the entire night inside its folds. The figure was old, but not in a way that suggested decay. Rather, they were weathered the way stones are weathered, by time, by patience, by waiting. Rick nudged Morty forward. "Go on, say hi." "Don't be weird," Morty swallowed. Hi." I'm Morty. The figure looked at him, eyes glowing faintly with starlight. Their voice was neither male nor female, but a quiet vibration that seemed to pass through Morty rather than around him. I know who you are, the teacher said. You've been stretching, Morty froze. Wait, what? You know about that? The teacher smiled gently, the constellations on their robe shifting as though in response. The cosmos notices those who bend, those who listen, those who carry. Morty glanced at Rick, expecting him to laugh or interrupt. But Rick was silent, watching with his usual scowl, though his eyes betrayed something closer to respect. The teacher gestured for Morty to sit. The ground was soft, covered in moss that glowed faintly under his weight. When Morty settled in, the teacher lifted a hand. The stars above began to move. Slowly, gracefully, they shifted into new constellations, each shape unfolding like a story. Every star is a memory, the teacher said. Some shine because they burn, some shine because they reflect, and some shine only because someone once loved them enough to remember. Morty's mouth opened slightly. So, stars are memories? The teacher tilted their head. What else could they be? Rick snorted. They're giant nuclear reactors, Morty. But sure, if you want bedtime metaphors, knock yourself out. The teacher ignored him, continuing to guide the stars with patient hands. They formed the shape of a child cradling a small flame, then the outline of a river flowing endlessly into the horizon. Morty, they said softly, not every mystery is meant to be solved. Some are only meant to be remembered. Like a song hummed without words, like a dream that fades but leaves a warmth in your chest. Morty thought of the heads of the whispers in the garage, of the boy by the lockers, of the way his body bent almost painfully when sadness filled the air. He thought of the girl who collected whispers in her hands like fragile threads. He whispered, but what if I don't understand? What if I can't remember right? The teacher's eyes glowed brighter, starlight spilling across Morty's face. Understanding is overrated. Memory is softer. It forgives your mistakes. It lets you carry things without needing to explain them. Morty blinked, his chest tight. He wanted to argue, to say he wasn't smart enough, that he wasn't like Rick, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he only nodded. Rick cleared his throat, clearly impatient. It's all right, that's enough mystical garbage. Morty doesn't need another bedtime story. He needs survival skills. You got anything practical for him? Or are we just going to sit around singing Kumbaya with the stars? The teacher turned their gaze on Rick. For the first time, Rick flinched. Just slightly, almost invisible. You hide behind sharpness, the teacher murmured. But even you were once a child who wished on stars. Rick's jaw tightened. He said nothing. Morty glanced between them, feeling the tension. But the teacher returned their gaze to him, their voice soft again. Morty, when you bend, when you stretch, don't fight it. Let it guide you. It is not weakness. It is not shame. It is the way you belong. The stars above shifted again, forming the shape of a great head, not human but vast, silent, familiar. Morty's breath caught. The cosmic heads outlined in constellations. They remember, the teacher whispered. They always remember. Morty's chest ached, not painfully but deeply, like something heavy yet beautiful had been placed inside him. The teacher lowered their hand. The stars returned to their places, quiet once more. Rick huffed, turning back toward the portal. All right, Morty, lesson's over. Let's get out of here before this turns into a cult recruitment speech. Morty stood slowly, reluctant to leave. He looked at the teacher one last time. They smiled faintly, as though already fading into the night sky. As he followed Rick back toward the glowing oval of the portal, Morty whispered under his breath, words he wasn't sure were his own. Some mysteries aren't for solving. They're for remembering. Rick didn't respond, but as they stepped through the portal, Morty noticed his grandfather's hands tremble slightly. And though Rick muttered complaints about cosmic hippies, his eyes lingered upward, just for a moment longer, as though searching for a star he had once known. That night, back in his room, Morty lay awake staring out his window. The stars above seemed different now. Not facts to be memorized, not dots to be connected into lines, but soft lights carrying songs too quiet for him to hear yet. He placed his hand against the glass, imagining the warmth of memory pressing back, and somewhere, across distances too wide to measure, a cosmic head drifted silently, humming a lullaby of belonging. Morty had never thought of Summer as a guide. She was loud, impatient, impatiently smart, always moving faster than he could follow. But recently something had shifted. Something quiet had begun to hum in the spaces between her words, in the pauses of her laughter, in the way she lingered when he needed her without him asking. It started one evening in the backyard. The sun had dipped low, painting everything in shades of orange and violet. The wind carried the faint smell of damp earth and leftover summer rain. Morty was stretching again, the ache and pull in his chest that had become both gift and burden, when Summer wandered over, her arms crossed and hair glowing gold in the last light. "You've been weird lately," she said, a voice teasing but soft, almost gentle. Morty shrugged. "Weird is kind of normal these days." Summer tilted her head. "You mean bending toward people when they're sad, crying, or whatever it is?" Morty's heart skipped. How did she know? He hadn't told anyone. Not even Rick. Summer smiled faintly, as though reading the answer in the way his shoulders slumped. "It's okay, Morty, I've noticed." "You can't hide it," Morty blinked. "Not hide it?" Yeah, I guess." Summer crouched beside him, eyes tracing the gentle pull of his body toward the empty garden chairs across the yard. "It's like you're feeling everything, huh?" Morty nodded slowly, unsure of what words could capture the sensation. "It's weird. Sometimes it hurts. Sometimes it's nice. But I can't stop it." Summer reached out and placed her hand on his shoulder. Not to fix, not to explain, just to be there. And somehow that was enough. "You know," she said softly, "sometimes you don't have to do anything. Sometimes just being there is the whole point." The next few days blurred into a quiet rhythm. Summer and Morty found themselves walking together through empty streets, sitting on the back porch while the stars blinked awake, listening to the soft hum of the universe. She didn't ask him to explain, didn't try to fix him, didn't even comment when his body bent involuntarily towards someone in need. She just let him exist, letting the echoes of his empathy fold naturally into her presence. One afternoon, Morty felt the pull stronger than ever before. Across the school courtyard, a child he didn't recognize stood crying, clutching a broken toy. Morty felt himself leaning toward the boy, chest stretching, knees bending slightly. He tried to resist, but the ache in his body was insistent. Summer noticed immediately. She came to his side, her hand brushing his, steadying him. "It's okay," she whispered. "Lean if you need to." "I've got you." The words gave him courage. His body bent fully, the stretch deep and strange, until he was almost hovering over the child. He knelt, softly speaking, though the words were simple and quiet. "Hey, it's okay. You're not alone. Here." The boy's sobs softened. His small hands clutched at Morty's, and for a moment the entire courtyard seemed to pause. Morty's chest ached, not unpleasantly, but with a weight of connection he had never felt before. Summer stayed beside him, silent, holding his shoulder, her eyes warm and steady. When the boy's tears ended, he ran off without a word, leaving only the faint trace of his sadness lingering in the air. Morty straightened, shaky, chest heaving. Summer leaned close. "You okay?" she asked. Morty nodded, voice trembling. Yeah, I think so." Summer smiled, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. "You're a good brother," she said softly. "Even when you don't know it, even when no one else notices." Morty looked at her, heart tight. He hadn't realized before how much her presence mattered, how her quiet acceptance, her willingness to witness, made the weight of his empathy feel lighter, easier to bear. That night, Morty lay awake, staring out his bedroom window. He thought of the boy in the courtyard, of Summer beside him, of the pull that would never truly leave his body. He realized something important. Empathy wasn't weakness. It wasn't a burden he carried alone. It was a thread, weaving him into the lives of those around him, connecting him to the world in ways he hadn't yet understood. Summer's words echoed in his mind, even when no one else notices. The next morning, Morty found Summer waiting at the kitchen table, her hair messy, her eyes bright with the kind of energy only morning can bring. "You stayed up late," she observed, reaching for her cereal. Yeah," Morty admitted. "Thinking. About what?" Morty hesitated. "About being there, about the echoes, about everything." Summer nodded thoughtfully, biting into a piece of toast. "Yeah, everything's a lot sometimes, but you don't have to carry it alone. You've got me. And the rest of us." Morty felt a warmth bloom in his chest, A gentle stretch that felt different this time, safe, steady, and soft. He realized then that Summer wasn't just a sister. She was a mirror, an anchor, a quiet companion through the strange pull of his gift. Over the next few weeks, their bond deepened in small, tender ways. Playful arguments softened into shared jokes. Moments of silence became comfortable instead of awkward. And whenever Morty's empathy stretched him too thin, Summer's presence grounded him. She never mocked, never questioned, only noticed and stayed. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge, Morty whispered, "Do you think the heads remember us?" Summer tilted her head, gazing upward. "I think they do. Maybe that's why they're quiet. Not because they're distant, but because they trust us to see, to feel, to remember." Morty's chest stretched again, this time with awe rather than ache. He thought of the echoes in the garage, the girl collecting whispers, the stars mapped like lullabies. And he thought of Summer, steady, kind, present, a companion in the quiet hum of the universe. He whispered again, softer, almost to himself, "Thanks for being here." Summer nudged his shoulder gently, a small smile playing at her lips. "Always, Morty, always," and somewhere unseen, the cosmic heads drifted silently overhead, their vast eyes reflecting not just memory, but the soft, luminous bond between two siblings, leaning toward each other in quiet understanding. The portal opened with its usual hiss, spilling pale green light across the backyard. Morty stepped forward cautiously, squinting. He expected another strange landscape, another odd planet with odd creatures. But what greeted him was calmer village lay before them, suspended in mist and light, streets paved not with stone but with a luminous, almost soft surface. Each step Morty took made a faint melodic chime, like tiny bells ringing beneath his feet. He glanced at Summer, who grinned and lifted her eyebrows, clearly just as intrigued. Rick, of course, had already stepped ahead, muttering something about dimensional physics nonsense, though his voice had lost some of its usual sarcasm, replaced with that rare, unreadable quiet. The villagers appeared just beyond the mist, figures moving slowly, deliberately. They walked so lightly it seemed impossible they had weight at all. Each footfall left no trace, no indentation, no ripple. It was as though they were part of the village itself, merging seamlessly with the glowing streets. Morty stopped. How are they walking like that?" Summer shrugged. "Maybe they're soft or careful?" Rick smirked faintly. "Careful is right. Everything in this dimension responds to intent. You step hard, you disrupt reality. You step gentle, you blend. Welcome to the village of light steps." Morty bent his knees slightly, trying to mimic the villagers. He noticed immediately that it wasn't just posture. It was the effort of thought, of attention. Every step he took while trying to walk lightly hummed softly under his feet. Missteps sent faint echoes pulsing outward, which he felt in his chest almost like guilt or awkwardness. One of the villagers noticed him. She was small, with hair like soft silver threads, and eyes that shone like dew on morning grass. She approached, moving as if gravity itself had softened around her. "You are new," she said softly, voice like water. Morty nodded. Yeah. "I'm Morty," she smiled faintly. "Then you must learn to step lightly." Morty frowned. "Step lightly." The villager gestured to the glowing streets. "Every step carries weight. You can stomp and disrupt, or walk gently and strengthen the ground beneath you. The difference is subtle, but it matters." Morty looked down at his shoes, feeling suddenly self-conscious. I don't know if I can." "You can," she said gently. "Your chest tells you when. Your body knows. Listen to it." Summer leaned close. "Morty's good at that kind of thing, actually. Feeling things, noticing things. Maybe he's already halfway there." Morty flushed. "I guess maybe," the villager nodded. "Follow me." They walked together along the glowing streets. Morty tried to match her soft, deliberate steps, bending slightly, leaning subtly, feeling each footfall as though it were a note in a song. At first his steps faltered, ringing too loudly, echoing faintly into the mist. The villager glanced back with a small, patient smile. "Do not be discouraged," she whispered. "Even missteps are remembered. They teach you rhythm." Morty closed his eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of her words sink into his chest. He felt the stretch there, not of sadness or empathy, but of attention, of focus, of care. He leaned forward slightly, grounding himself in the hum beneath his feet. His steps softened, the chime underfoot becoming steady, harmonious, almost like a lullaby. Summer followed beside him, her own steps echoing faintly against his, playful yet careful. Rick wandered behind them, fiddling with his portal gun, muttering to himself but silent enough to respect the quiet magic of the place. The village grew around them. There were shops made of translucent crystal, fountains flowing with liquid light, and children chasing each other in spirals of gentle laughter. Each person moved carefully, deliberately, their steps leaving no mark, but strengthening the invisible web of life beneath their feet. Morty felt his chest stretch again, but this time with wonder rather than burden. He realized that the gift he carried, empathy bending toward others' pain and joy, could be expressed in different ways. Here in this quiet village, gentleness itself was power. He didn't need to shout or force. He only needed to move thoughtfully, consciously, with care. A child approached him, tiny feet gliding across the luminous street. She held a small glass sphere, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. "Do you feel it?" she asked. Morty tilted his head. "Feel what?" "The song," she said. "The weight of steps, the pull of care. It hums beneath your feet if you're listening." He knelt slowly, letting the sphere rest in his hands. It pulsed faintly, and he felt the hum of the village wrap around him, tugging gently at his chest. The stretch, the pull, the ache, it was all there but softened. He realized the gift he had thought of as burden could be transformed, reshaped, bent into something lighter, something generous. Summer crouched beside him, watching the sphere pulse in his hands. "See? You're doing it. You're learning to carry without breaking." Rick, unusually silent, watched from the steps of a crystal fountain. For the first time, Morty thought he might be proud. Not loud, not in words, but in a weightless acknowledgement that passed from one person to another without explanation. As night fell over the village of light steps, the streets glowed brighter, humming with the soft music of careful movement. Morty felt the stretch in his chest ease, settling like soft moss. He realized the lesson of the village wasn't in perfection or control, but in presence, in intention, in gentleness as a form of strength. Before they left, the silver-haired villager placed a hand on Morty's shoulder. "Remember this feeling. The world is full of echoes. Step lightly and you strengthen what others leave behind." Morty nodded, understanding. The hum of the village, the soft light beneath his feet, and the gentle weight of summer beside him stayed in his chest, a quiet song he could carry anywhere. Back in the garage, the portal closed behind them with a familiar hiss. Rick muttered about interdimensional nonsense, but Morty barely heard him. The lesson of the village of light steps lingered. Gentleness, attentiveness, and quiet care could bend the universe in ways force never could. That night, lying in bed, Morty whispered to himself, "I'll step lightly. I'll try." And somewhere, unseen but deeply felt, the cosmic heads drifted, their silent gaze carrying the soft hum of approval, a lullaby for those who dared to feel, to bend, and to carry the weight of the world without breaking it. The portal landed them on the edge of a vast forest, the ground soft underfoot and shaded with ancient silver-leafed trees. The air smelled faintly of moss and honey, of rain that hadn't yet fallen. In the distance, Morty heard it first, a low, gentle melody like a hum carried on water. "Rick," Morty whispered, tilting his head, "do you hear that?" Rick, fiddling with the portal gun even though they were clearly already done traveling, paused and cocked an eyebrow. "Yeah, Morty, that's new. Haven't seen that river before. Looks like someone else's kind of weird." Morty stepped forward, drawn by the melody. The trees opened into a clearing, and there it was, a river wide and luminous, flowing without sound, yet humming a tune he could feel in his chest. The water glowed faintly, reflecting not just the trees above, but shapes, faces, fleeting glimpses of memories that seemed both familiar and distant. "It's singing," Morty breathed. Rick chuckled softly. "It's not literally, Morty. That's just how this dimension interprets memory. River hums like a lullaby to anyone who's willing to listen." Morty stepped closer, letting the hum vibrate through him. He felt his chest stretch again, but this time in anticipation rather than burden. He reached down and dipped his fingers into the water. The glow pulsed, sending tiny ripples along the river, and for a moment he felt as though the river knew him, knew every sorrow, every joy, every stretch of empathy he had ever carried. "Whoa," Morty whispered, eyes wide. "It knows me." Rick gave a rare, quiet nod. "Everything here's memory, Morty. Not just your memory, but everyone's. Some of it you've seen, some you haven't. That river doesn't judge and it only holds." Morty knelt at the edge, tracing patterns in the water. Faces flickered on the surface. His own, his family, the girl who collected whispers, even the small boy from the courtyard. He gasped. He could see himself in so many moments, bending, stretching, carrying. The weight of it was startling but beautiful. Rick crouched beside him, quieter than Morty had ever seen. "Rivers like this are rare, Morty. They remind you of what's been, what matters, what lingers. Sometimes we forget to look back." Morty glanced at him. "So, this river's like a memory pool?" Rick shrugged. "Kind of. Don't think about it too hard. Just feel it. That's the whole point." Morty's gaze drifted downstream, where the water widened and shimmered like a living mirror. There he saw himself not as he was in the moment, but as he had been. The small child staring at the first drifting cosmic head, the boy bending toward another's sadness, the teen struggling with stretches of empathy he didn't understand. And somewhere in the river he glimpsed Rick, younger, quieter, softer, almost unrecognizable in his stillness. Morty shivered. "It's like I can see everything all at once." Rick laid a hand on his shoulder, heavy but comforting. "That's why these moments matter, Morty. The universe is big, confusing, chaotic. But every stretch, every bend, every whisper you've ever followed, it's all remembered, even if no one else notices." Morty traced the river with his hands, feeling the hum vibrate through his fingers, into his chest, until it spread into his toes. He felt as though the river were breathing with him, a living reminder that memory wasn't just in the mind, but in every part of his being. He whispered softly, "I don't want to forget any of it." Rick's gaze softened slightly. "Good, that's the right feeling." Summer, who had been exploring the edges of the forest, wandered back with a small smile. "It's beautiful," she said. "Like it's alive," Morty nodded. "It is, it knows us. It holds everything we care about, everything we've been." Summer crouched beside him. "And it doesn't judge, right? It just lets things be." Morty's fingers lingered in the water. "Yeah, just lets them be. I think I finally understand a little more. About stretching, about feeling, about carrying things." The river's hum rose and fell like a heartbeat. Morty leaned closer, listening. Among the flowing memories he could hear faint whispers, his own thoughts from other days, the soft murmur of the girl who collected whispers, the tiny voice of the boy from the courtyard. The river carried them all, threading them together into something gentle, whole. Rick stood, brushing off his hands. "Time to go, Morty. Can't stare at memory rivers all day. You might get stuck there." Morty looked up reluctantly, eyes lingering on the luminous water. I'll come back. I'll remember it." Rick nodded, oddly approving. "Good, that's the point." Before stepping through the portal, Morty touched the water one last time. A warmth surged through him, not like a spark or a shock, but a calm glow settling in his chest. He felt the pull in his body, the stretch that often accompanied empathy, now softened, tempered by understanding. Summer reached for his hand. "You okay?" Morty squeezed hers gently. Yeah, I think I am." As they stepped through the portal, the hum of the river faded, but the memory lingered, echoing softly in Morty's chest like a quiet lullaby. And somewhere far above in the silent night sky, the cosmic heads drifted, their vast, gentle presence carrying the same song. The hum of memory, the soft resonance of a universe that remembered those who truly listened. That night, Morty lay in bed staring at the ceiling, tracing constellations in his mind. He thought of the river, its soft glow, the whispers flowing through it, the stretches of empathy that had once felt like burdens, but now felt like threads tying him to the world. He whispered quietly, almost to himself, "I'll remember everything I can." And somewhere in the distance the river's lullaby flowed on, invisible to the eyes, but felt in the chest of one boy who had learned to bend, to listen, and to carry without breaking. The portal dropped them on the edge of a valley that shimmered under a pale lavender sky. Smoke from distant fires curled upward in delicate spirals, carrying faint scents of spices, wood and sweet fruits. The air vibrated softly, not with music or clamor, but with something quieter, anticipation, warmth, and the gentle pulse of 1,000 small lives moving together. Morty stepped forward cautiously, adjusting his backpack. "Rick, what is this place?" Rick, unusually silent, gestured broadly. "Some kind of festival." "Quiet one. Don't expect fireworks or screaming announcements. This is subtle. It's the kind of thing that reaches the heart without hitting the ears." Summer walked beside Morty, tilting her head, eyes wide. "It feels soft, but alive." The village stretched before them. People moved calmly, carrying trays of glowing fruits, bundles of flowers and soft lanterns that pulsed faintly in rhythm with the valley's heartbeat. Children skipped carefully along the smooth pathways, their laughter light and airy. Elders sat in circles, speaking in hushed tones, exchanging gestures that seemed older than language itself. Morty felt his chest stretch as they walked. Not with sadness this time, not with longing, but with a gentle ache of connection. He was part of something here. A fleeting, tender bond he didn't fully understand but wanted to protect. "Why is it so quiet?" Morty asked. Rick shrugged, fiddling with a small device in his pocket. "Quiet is underrated, Morty. People don't need noise to celebrate. Sometimes all it takes is attention and someone noticing you without asking for anything back." Morty watched as a small child approached an elderly traveler, bowing slightly before placing a tiny, glowing flower in their hands. The elder's eyes softened, and a faint hum rippled through the valley. Morty felt the vibration in his chest. It was the same pull he had learned to bend toward in others, subtle, insistent, warm. Summer nudged him gently. "Go on, Morty, help." Morty hesitated, then moved forward. A small girl had dropped a tray of glowing fruits, scattering them across the cobblestone. Morty bent carefully, picking them up and arranging them back in neat rows. He felt a faint warmth in his hands, as though the festival itself was noticing his care. "Thank you," the girl whispered, her voice soft as feathers. She smiled, and Morty felt the pull ease slightly, a tiny hum settling in his chest. Rick watched from a few steps away, muttering something under his breath. For once he didn't mock or intervene. He simply observed, letting the moment unfold. The festival continued, gentle and unhurried. Morty found himself helping an elder light a lantern, guiding it into the sky. The lantern floated upward, carrying not only its soft glow but the weight of countless small memories. Whispered wishes, quiet gratitude, soft songs hummed in the night. Summer handed him another lantern. "Your turn," she said. Morty held it carefully, feeling the warmth of the candle, the gentle vibration of the festival beneath his feet. When he released it, it rose into the sky, joining dozens of others in a chorus of soft light. Morty felt his chest stretch again, not painfully but beautifully, as though the festival itself were folding him into its rhythm. He looked around. Strangers smiled, children laughed quietly, elders nodded in approval. No one rushed. No one demanded. Every gesture, every action seemed intentional, steeped in attention and care. Morty whispered to Summer, "It feels like everyone here is listening. Not to me exactly, but to everything." Summer nodded, eyes bright. "Yeah, that's the point. You feel it, right? That quiet hum. That's how people leave pieces of themselves behind." Rick grunted softly. "And that, Morty, is why quiet can be more powerful than a million lasers or giant head explosions. You feel it because it matters. It's real." Morty continued walking through the festival, helping when he could, noticing when he couldn't. He felt the stretch of empathy in his chest fold gently around the laughter, the small kindnesses, the unspoken gratitude. His body had learned the rhythm of care, not bending toward pain only, but leaning into joy, into connection, into quiet presence. He noticed a boy sitting alone near a fountain, hands resting on his knees. Morty bent slightly, leaning toward him, feeling a gentle pull. "Hey, you okay?" he asked softly. The boy shrugged, uncertain. Morty didn't push. He simply sat a few feet away, sharing the quiet space. Gradually, the boy's shoulders relaxed, a small smile forming. The pull eased, warm and calm. Morty realized then that his gift wasn't just about bending toward sadness. It was about creating space for it, for presence without intrusion. Even Rick seemed softened by the festival's rhythm. He helped a small elder balance a basket of flowers, muttering to himself about stupid sticky petals, but there was no edge in his tone. For once Rick allowed himself to be still. As night deepened, the lanterns drifted higher, carrying whispers, wishes, songs and memories into the star-filled sky. Morty and Summer stood side by side, watching the glow rise. The stretch in Morty's chest had eased into warmth, a reminder that small acts of kindness, quiet, unnoticed, tender, left echoes that lasted far longer than any shout or spectacle. Morty whispered to Summer, "I think I get it now. You don't have to fix everything, you just lean notice, help when you can." Summer smiled, nudging him gently. "Exactly. That's the secret of the quiet ones, Morty. The ones who leave behind light without expecting anyone to see it." Rick, unusually silent, looked up at the lanterns. His eyes reflected the soft glow, and for a brief moment, Morty thought he saw something almost like pride. As they stepped back toward the portal, Morty felt a lingering warmth in his chest, a hum beneath his feet, and the gentle pull of connection stretching across the festival. He realized that life wasn't about loud victories or dramatic moments, but these quiet celebrations, these small, intentional gestures that rippled softly into the world. That night, lying in bed, Morty stared out the window at the stars above. He remembered the lanterns, the glowing fruits, the soft hum of kindness vibrating through the valley. He whispered to himself, "I'll notice. I'll lean. I'll carry what I can without breaking it." And somewhere above, drifting silently across the universe, the cosmic heads hovered, their vast presence humming with quiet approval, reflecting the soft resonance of a boy who had learned to bend, to notice, and to carry the small lights of the world wherever he went. The portal opened with a soft hum that felt heavier than usual. Morty stepped through first, feeling a quiet tension in the air, something he had never sensed on their travels before. The sky was pale, almost washed out, with clouds drifting lazily across it. The land stretched endlessly, dotted with small hills and winding streams. But it wasn't the landscape that felt important. It was the stillness. Rick stepped through behind him, unusually silent. His eyes were fixed on a distant figure, shrouded in twilight, waiting patiently by a narrow riverbank. The figure seemed small, frail even, yet carried a presence Rick could not ignore. Morty sensed it immediately. This wasn't a mission, wasn't a game, wasn't some experiment. This was memory. Rick didn't speak as they walked toward the river. Morty stayed close, unsure whether to talk, to ask, to break the quiet. But silence seemed correct. The figure turned as they approached. Rick stopped, chest tight, shoulders heavy. For the first time in Morty's memory, Rick's face held something unguarded. Grief, respect, and a deep, almost reverent love. "Hello, old friend," Rick said softly. His voice, usually edged with sarcasm and impatience, trembled slightly. I came as soon as I could." The figure nodded, smiling faintly. Their eyes shimmered with decades of shared memories, of lessons given and received. Morty noticed the lines etched into the figure's face, each one carrying quiet stories that no words could fully capture. Rick took a deep breath. I've been running. You know me. Never stay still. But I needed to say goodbye properly this time." The figure tilted their head. "Goodbyes are overrated, Rick. They belong to the living. Memory, care, understanding. Those are the real farewells." Rick's gaze softened. Morty felt the tension in his chest stretch, the way it always did when someone else's heart tugged at him. He realized that Rick, for all his brilliance and bravado, was just as human as anyone, just as fragile, just as capable of tenderness. "I never thanked you properly," Rick whispered. "For everything, for the quiet, the patience, the wisdom you handed me when I wasn't ready to understand it." The figure's eyes glimmered. "And yet here you are, Rick, not running, not hiding the stretch in your chest, the bend in your heart. You came." Morty watched them together, noting the subtle tension and release in Rick's shoulders, the way his hands trembled ever so slightly when he reached out to the river's edge. He didn't fully understand what was being said, not yet, but he understood the weight, the gravity of the moment. Rick knelt beside the river, gathering smooth stones in his hands. "I want to leave something," he said quietly. "A token, a memory, I don't know, proof that I was here, that I cared, that I—" "Understood." The mentor smiled, nodding. "That is all anyone can hope for. That and presence, and you've given both." Rick placed the stones carefully in the shallow water. Each one shimmered softly, reflecting the pale sky and the distant mountains. Morty felt the pull of empathy stretching in his chest, soft but insistent, as though the river itself were acknowledging Rick's silent farewell. The mentor leaned closer, voice gentle but firm. "Remember, Rick, lessons aren't only for the young, they're for the living. They echo in ways you cannot predict, in whispers, in hearts, in quiet stretches. They persist." Rick nodded, swallowing hard. He looked at Morty for the first time, eyes meeting his grandson's. "See that, Morty? That's how it works. Memories, lessons, love, even when words fail." Morty felt a strange warmth, his chest easing, the familiar ache of empathy softening into reflection. He realized that what Rick carried, grief, respect, memory, was a kind of stretching too. Just quieter, deeper, less visible than his own, but just as real. The mentor stepped back, motioning toward the horizon. "I must go now." But not truly. The river, the stones, the stories, they remain. And so do you, Rick. You do not leave alone. Rick exhaled, eyes misting. I understand. Thank you. For everything." The figure smiled faintly and began to fade, their presence folding into the landscape, leaving only the soft hum of the river and the gentle ripple of the stones. Morty felt the pull in his chest again, a stretch of sadness mixed with awe and tenderness. "Grandpa?" Morty said softly, stepping closer. Rick didn't answer immediately. He stared at the river, hands still in the water. Finally he spoke, voice low, almost reverent. "Morty, life's full of quiet lessons. Some we give, some we take, some we remember long after they leave, and some are just for bending into." Morty nodded slowly. "I think I understand." Rick glanced at him, a faint, almost imperceptible smile tugging at his lips. "You're getting there, Morty. You'll carry the stretches better than I ever could. You'll notice the quiet. You'll honor the memories." The two of them stood together in silence for a long moment, the river humming beneath their feet. Morty felt the pull of empathy, the stretch in his chest. But it was softened now, tempered by understanding, by presence, by witness. Summer wandered over, carrying a small lantern she had found by the riverbank. "Everything okay?" she asked. Rick looked at her, voice lighter now. "Yeah, everything's okay." Morty reached out, feeling the warmth of his family around him, subtle, quiet, grounding. The stretch of his chest no longer felt burdensome. It felt connected. It felt alive. As the sun dipped behind the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and lavender, the river reflected every color, every ripple, every memory. Rick finally let go of the stones, letting them drift downstream. They shimmered briefly in the last light, carrying the weight of farewell and memory into the distance. Morty whispered softly, almost to himself, "I'll remember this. He'll remember all of it." Rick glanced at him, eyes soft. "Good. That's what counts. Remembering, noticing, carrying without breaking. That's the quiet power, Morty. That's the real stretch." They turned together toward the portal. Morty glanced back at the river, the fading mentor, the soft hum of memory lingering in the air. He felt the stretch in his chest ease into warmth, a quiet echo that would stay with him. And somewhere, far above in the silent cosmos, the cosmic heads drifted, witnessing not only Morty's stretch, but Rick's quiet act of farewell, carrying the hum of memory, reflection, and love into the infinite night. The portal opened into a quiet plain that stretched endlessly beneath a sky streaked with fading gold and violet. The air smelled faintly of rain and old earth, soft and grounding. Morty stepped forward, taking in the landscape. What caught his eye immediately were the shoes. They were everywhere, small, large, worn, pristine, scattered across the field, standing upright as if frozen mid-step. Each pair seemed to hum faintly, vibrating with stories that weren't spoken aloud but carried in the shape, the crease, the sole, the wear. Morty knelt down, picking up a small, scuffed sneaker. He felt the faint pull in his chest, the familiar stretch of empathy, now tinged with curiosity. He could almost hear whispers, a child's laughter, the click of hurried steps, the soft tread of someone walking to meet a friend. Rick stood beside him, hands shoved into his lab coat pockets. "Yeah, that's kind of a weird one, Morty. Shoes everywhere. Legacy or something like it. People leave more behind than they know. More than they ever realize." Morty turned the sneaker over in his hands, amazed. "They remember people, or the people remember them?" Rick smirked faintly, though softer than usual. Maybe both. Maybe it's the echo of steps. Every footprint, every walk, every bend, every stretch. It adds up. Some of it lingers. Some of it waits for someone to notice. Morty set the shoe back down gently, noticing a pair of worn boots next to it. Their leather was cracked and soft, as if molded to the foot of someone long gone. He crouched, tracing the curves with his fingers, and felt the quiet resonance of a life lived in small, ordinary ways. Walks to school, errands, late-night thoughts, small acts of kindness, silent apologies. Summer wandered over, brushing a strand of hair from her face. It's kind of sad, isn't it? All these shoes, all these stories, people who left and never came back. Morty shook his head slightly. Not sad, just remembered. They're here in their own way. You can feel them if you listen. Summer nodded thoughtfully, sitting cross-legged on the grass. I guess that's why we're here. To notice, to be part of it, even if only for a moment. Morty walked slowly through the field, letting the hum of shoes reach into his chest. Each pair was different. Small sandals that whispered of a child's first steps, sturdy boots that carried the weight of a lifetime, polished shoes that clicked softly as if in rehearsal for a grand hall he would never enter. Rick followed, unusually quiet, bending slightly to touch a pair of cracked work boots. He seemed to linger longer than Morty had expected, as if feeling the life once carried in them. Morty sensed that beneath Rick's bravado and sarcasm there was a quiet grief, a recognition of those who had taught him, guided him, or simply walked beside him. Morty stopped in front of a small pair of shoes, frayed and worn at the edges. He knelt, holding them lightly in his hands. He could feel the stretch of empathy in his chest, pulling him toward their story. He whispered softly, "Who were you? And where did you go?" The air seemed to respond, faint whispers curling through the grass. Morty could almost imagine the person who had worn the shoes, cautious yet brave, bending toward others, leaving small traces of kindness along the way. Summer came to his side, her voice soft. "It's like everyone leaves a mark, Morty, even if it's just footprints or laughter or a sandwich someone remembers. The shoes, they're like memories you can touch." Morty nodded slowly, setting the pair back down carefully. I understand a little more. The stretch I feel, the pull toward people, the empathy, maybe it's all connected. It's like walking alongside everyone who's gone before." Rick finally spoke, voice low, almost reverent. "Yeah, that's the point, Morty. Life's less about grand explosions and more about these small marks. Tiny echoes, tiny kindnesses. That's the real legacy." Morty wandered further, noticing a path where shoes seemed to lead in a line, fading into the horizon. He imagined the stories they carried. A teenager running late for school, an old woman visiting a friend, a man returning home from a long day. Each step left an imprint that wasn't gone, only transformed into memory. He paused and whispered, "So, even if people leave, they're still part of everything. Part of the stretch, part of the echoes." Summer smiled. "Exactly. That's why it matters to notice, Morty. To carry it forward even just a little. To step lightly, but remember the footprints behind you." Rick bent down beside a pair of worn sandals, tracing the sole with a finger. "Every step we take adds to the field. You get it now, Morty. Every act, every word, every tiny bit of care, it sticks. That's why your stretches matter. That's why you notice. You're not just bending towards sadness. You're honoring everything that came before." Morty felt warmth spread in his chest, the stretch of empathy now interwoven with understanding, memory, and quiet reverence. He realized that the field of shoes, the hum beneath his feet, and the stories they carried were not just echoes of loss, they were echoes of care, connection, and small acts of love. He knelt by a particularly worn pair of boots, larger than his own, cracked and weathered, and whispered softly, "I'll remember you. Every step, every stretch, every little thing you carried." Summer came to stand beside him, quiet now. "We're all walking together, Morty. The living, the memories, the stretches. The echoes never really fade." Rick straightened, eyes scanning the horizon. "All right, Morty. Enough philosophy for one field trip. But remember this. You're walking in echoes. Carry them well. That's your power." Morty nodded slowly, absorbing every word, every feeling, every quiet pull of empathy in his chest. He walked back through the field, stepping lightly, touching each pair of shoes with care, feeling the soft resonance of every life they represented. That night, as Morty lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he imagined the field of shoes under the lavender sky, each one humming softly, each step remembered. He whispered to himself, "I'll carry the footprints, the stretches, the echoes. I'll step lightly and I'll remember." And somewhere, drifting across the silent cosmos, the cosmic heads observed him, vast and gentle, reflecting the same quiet hum of care, memory, and the enduring resonance of small tender acts that ripple far beyond sight. The portal opened with its familiar hum, spilling pale moonlight across a quiet meadow. Morty stepped through first, adjusting his backpack and squinting at the soft glow of the grass beneath his feet. The air smelled faintly of dew and wildflowers, carrying a calm that made his chest stretch gently, as though inviting him to notice everything. A small figure stood at the edge of a shallow stream, staring up at the stars. Morty noticed immediately. The child was alone, small shoulders tense, eyes wide and curious, yet tinged with a quiet, unspoken question. "Hi," Morty called softly, bending slightly as he approached. "Are you okay?" The child turned, eyes blinking in surprise. I want to know why the stars fade," the child said, voice almost a whisper, fragile as the ripples on the stream. Morty felt the pull in his chest, a familiar stretch of empathy, subtle but insistent. He crouched to meet the child's gaze. "Why the stars fade?" he repeated. "That's a big question." The child nodded, eyes glimmering. "Every night they shine, but then they go. Where do they go? Why do they leave?" Morty let the question hang in the air, feeling the hum of the universe beneath his feet. He realized that the child wasn't asking for facts or science, but for understanding, for comfort, for a glimpse of quiet meaning. Rick stepped through the portal behind him, watching silently. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer explanations, only observed. Summer followed, settling beside Morty, her presence calm and steady. Morty inhaled slowly, letting the stretch of empathy and curiosity unfold. "The stars, they fade because they need rest," he said softly. "Even stars get tired. Even the brightest lights need a pause. They're not gone forever. They're just waiting to shine again." The child tilted their head, considering. "Waiting to shine again?" Morty nodded. "Yeah, they take their rest so they can come back. And we have our rest too. Sometimes we go quiet, sometimes we bend, sometimes we stretch. But it's not forever. We shine again." The child smiled faintly, a small, fragile thing. Morty noticed the way their tiny hands clutched at the hem of their shirt, a gesture of both relief and wonder. Summer leaned close. "See? Even the universe rests, even the stars. It's okay to notice, to ask, and then to let things be." Rick, for once, didn't mock or analyze. He simply nodded, a quiet acknowledgement passing between him and Morty, the silent understanding that sometimes the best lesson is the simplest, that impermanence is natural, and rest is necessary. Morty extended a hand to the child. "Come sit with me," he said softly. "We can watch the stars fade together. You don't have to understand everything right now. Just notice. That's enough." The child hesitated, then stepped forward, sliding into the soft grass beside Morty. They watched silently as the stars shimmered, some bright, some faint, some blinking out entirely, leaving only the soft glow of distant galaxies. "You know," Morty whispered, "every star leaves a little light behind. Even when it fades, it's still part of everything." The child tilted their head. "Even if we don't see it?" Morty smiled faintly, chest stretching in quiet warmth. "Even if we don't see it. That's the magic. Some things matter, even when they're quiet, even when we don't notice. That's why we remember. That's why we care." Summer nudged him gently. "And sometimes you just lean into the quiet. Let it be enough." The child reached for Morty's hand, tiny fingers curling around his. Morty felt the familiar stretch of empathy, softened now, tempered by understanding, presence, and the gentle hum of connection. Rick shifted slightly, hands in his pockets, looking at the fading stars. He said nothing, but Morty felt the quiet approval in his gaze, the unspoken acknowledgement that the universe, the stars, the stretches of empathy, even small acts like this, were part of something larger, something gentle and lasting. As the night deepened, the child asked small questions, not about science or numbers, but about feelings, about stories, about why the moon sometimes looked like a cradle, and sometimes like a lantern. Morty answered softly, letting the stretch in his chest flow outward, gentle, warm, and steady. At one point the child whispered, "Do the stars ever forget us?" Morty shook his head slowly. "No, they don't forget. They remember us in their own way. And even when we can't see them, they shine in memory. And sometimes they remind us that even quiet things matter." Summer reached over and squeezed Morty's shoulder. "See? That's the stretch we carry, Morty. Remembering, noticing, helping even in the smallest ways. That's how the echoes last." Rick finally spoke, voice low and uncharacteristically gentle. "Morty, sometimes the real lesson isn't about fixing or bending or understanding. It's about being there quietly, presently for someone else." "That's enough." Morty nodded slowly, glancing at the child. Their small hand still held his, eyes reflecting the faint shimmer of stars above. Morty felt the stretch in his chest fold into warmth, a quiet melody of care, presence, and understanding. The child yawned softly, head tilting against Morty's shoulder. Morty whispered, almost to himself, "Rest, little one. Even the brightest need it." The river nearby hummed faintly, a lullaby of water and memory. The wind whispered through the meadow, carrying scents of wildflowers and earth. The stars shimmered faintly, fading gently, then glowing again, as if in rhythm with the quiet, stretching hearts beneath them. Morty lay back on the grass, the child curled beside him. Summer reclined nearby, eyes half closed. Rick leaned against a tree, quiet, reflective, but not distant. Morty realized that this, the quiet presence, the shared stretch of empathy, the gentle watching of stars fading and returning, was as powerful as any adventure. "Any experiment, any cosmic encounter," he whispered again, softly. "We don't have to know everything. We just have to notice, and rest, and shine again when it's time." The child murmured sleepily, "I'll remember the stars." "Yes," Morty whispered back, "and they'll remember you." And somewhere far above, drifting silently across the cosmos, the cosmic heads watched, their vast, gentle eyes reflecting the same soft hum of memory, rest and quiet care, echoing the lessons of bending, noticing, and carrying the smallest lights of the world without breaking. Morty felt the stretch in his chest ease completely, for the first time in weeks. It was soft, warm, and tender, a reminder that sometimes the most important acts were the quietest. Listening, holding space, and simply being. He whispered again, almost to the universe itself, "Thanks for noticing. Thanks for letting me notice. And even when things fade, we shine again." And somewhere in the infinite night, the child slept, Morty rested, and the stars hummed softly, carrying their quiet song into the cosmos. The night sky stretched above them, deeper and more infinite than Morty had ever seen. Stars shimmered faintly, whispering against the vast black canvas, carrying their quiet songs. Morty and Rick stood together on a soft hill, the grass brushing against their ankles, still warm from the day's light. The air was still, the hum of distant dimensions faint but perceptible to anyone who cared to notice. Morty tilted his head. "Do you feel that, Rick?" he whispered, voice barely audible. Rick didn't answer immediately. He just stared, as though reading the sky like a page he had long studied but never fully understood. Slowly he nodded. "Yeah, something's back." Morty's chest stretched with a familiar pull, that gentle, insistent tug he had learned to recognize. Empathy, curiosity, and quiet awe all intertwined. And then, slowly, impossibly, the cosmic heads appeared. They didn't arrive with fanfare or explosions, only with presence. Enormous, silent, drifting faces moved across the horizon, their eyes luminous but not harsh, their mouths closed in quiet contemplation. Each one seemed layered with decades, centuries, perhaps millennia of memory, yet none of them felt distant. They felt tender. Morty's knees weakened slightly and he sank to the soft grass. He had seen them before, yes, as a child in fleeting glimpses, half-remembered dreams, quiet hums in the garage. But this time, they were fully here. And he understood deep in his chest that this wasn't fear or awe born of spectacle. It was awe born of recognition, of connection, of being seen and held without judgment. "They're here," Morty whispered. "Really here." Rick knelt beside him, unusually still. "Morty, you've grown. You notice things differently now. They've noticed you, too." Morty reached out as though he could touch the vast faces above. Of course he couldn't. And yet he felt the pull, the stretch, the gentle tug that threaded his chest to theirs. It wasn't physical, it was emotional. A resonance that settled in his bones and his heart simultaneously. He remembered the first time he had seen them, a child pressed to his window, all without fear, curiosity without urgency. He remembered the whispers in the garage, the stretches of empathy, the nights of dreaming side by side with Rick. Every step, every act of noticing, every tender gesture he had carried. It had led to this moment. The cosmic heads drifted closer, faces layered like soft clouds, eyes watching, remembering. Morty understood then. They weren't observers, not exactly. They were participants in quiet ways, guardians of memory, keepers of attention, silent witnesses of the stretches of heart. They don't judge, Morty whispered. They remember us. Rick nodded slowly, voice soft, almost reverent. Exactly. That's why they're here. Not to scare, not to awe, but to remind. Remembering is love too, Morty. You've been doing it all along, in your way. Morty felt warmth bloom in his chest, the familiar stretch softening into something like belonging. He realized then that his gift, bending toward others' pain, stretching into their hearts, noticing the small lights, wasn't burden. It was bridge. And now, standing beneath these enormous silent heads, he felt the connection fully. Summer stepped forward from the hill, her own chest soft with the same recognition. I think I get it, she whispered. They're not just big floating faces. They're care. They're attention. Morty turned to her, eyes wide. Yeah, and they've been with us all along, waiting, watching, loving, quietly. One of the cosmic heads drifted closer than the others, enormous and impossibly serene. Morty felt its gaze settle on him. Not probing, not judging, only present. And in that presence he felt every moment of his life, the stretches, the bends, the quiet acts, the whispered empathy, acknowledged. Every misstep, every hesitation, every moment of growth, all of it held. Rick exhaled, watching the scene. See, Morty, this is what I've been trying to show you all along. Power isn't in explosions, inventions, or interdimensional escapades. Power is in noticing, in presence, in caring without breaking. They see that in you. Morty's chest hummed, the familiar stretch wrapping around him like a gentle blanket. He realized that his connection to the cosmic heads was a reflection of everything he had learned, everything he had carried. The girl who collected whispers, the river that sang, the village of light steps, the quiet festival, the child who asked why, the garden of empty shoes. Every lesson, every stretch, every act of presence, it was all here resonating in the quiet hum of these vast drifting faces. He whispered softly, almost to himself, I understand now. I understand what it means to be part of something bigger, to notice, to carry, to remember, to belong. A second cosmic head drifted even closer, luminous and immense. Morty felt a pull in his chest stronger than ever before, but it was no longer a stretch of strain. It was a stretch of acceptance, of resonance, of recognition. His empathy, his attentiveness, his small acts of care, they were not invisible. They had not been wasted. Summer watched silently, her own breath steady. I feel it too, Morty. It's love. Quiet, patient love. Morty nodded, eyes tracing the soft contours of the drifting heads. He realized then that love wasn't always loud, wasn't always dramatic. Sometimes love was presence. Sometimes it was memory. Sometimes it was the hum of acknowledgement, the quiet resonance that made all the small stretches worthwhile. Rick stood, placing a hand on Morty's shoulder. And that, Morty, is the real journey. Not glory, not victories, not applause. Just presence, just noticing, just it being. Morty turned back to the cosmic heads. Their drifting forms shimmered faintly, folding into the night sky, yet always present. He could almost hear their unspoken song, a lullaby for hearts that bend, a melody for stretches carried without recognition, a soft hum that said, we see you. We remember. You matter! He felt a deep sigh escape him, not of exhaustion but of relief. The weight of caring, of noticing, of bending toward others' lives was acknowledged. The stretch in his chest had folded softly into warmth, a quiet glow that would carry with him always. Summer leaned her head against his shoulder. Morty felt the pull again, now calm and serene. There, love, Morty, she said softly, even in silence. Yes, Morty whispered, closing his eyes, even in silence. Above, the cosmic heads slowly drifted higher, fading into the distance. Their presence lingered like the softest echo, wrapping the hill, the meadow, the portal, and the hearts below in quiet reverence. Morty felt the final tug in his chest ease, a reminder that he was part of something vast, gentle, eternal. He whispered to the universe, "I see you." "I remember. I'll carry it." Rick patted his shoulder gently. "Good, that's all anyone can do, Morty, just notice. Just be present. Just stretch and carry." As the portal hummed open behind them, Morty took a final look at the sky, the fading forms of the cosmic heads, and the quiet resonance that lingered. He felt the pull of empathy, the stretch of his chest, and a warmth that threaded through him. A lullaby for the heart, a reminder that he mattered, that his care mattered. That quiet love mattered, and somewhere in the infinite cosmos, the cosmic heads drifted, watching, remembering, humming quietly, carrying the resonance of one boy who had bent, noticed, and loved without breaking, and a grandfather who had quietly taught him to do the same. Morty breathed out softly, eyes closing. The stars above glimmered faintly, a quiet echo of the love and presence he had witnessed. And somewhere, even now, Rick is still out there, resting in his own strange way. Morty, too, dreaming in the stars. The portal shimmered quietly, spilling a pale, soft light across the garage where Morty had been tinkering with a small device Rick had left him. He heard the familiar hum of the universe outside, the distant pull of unseen dimensions, and yet for once his chest felt calm, stretched gently but not strained. A familiar voice called softly from the edge of the room. "Morty?" He turned, heart lifting. Summer stood there, older somehow, not just in age but in presence. Her eyes carried the kind of quiet patience and understanding that only comes from having traveled, observed, and reflected deeply. The usual spark of mischief was there, yes, but it was tempered, softened by a warmth Morty hadn't seen before. "Summer!" Morty exclaimed, rushing forward. He almost forgot to breathe in the moment, almost forgot the gentle pull of empathy in his chest as he hugged his sister. She smiled, arms wrapping around him. "I've been away," she said quietly, "learning things, seeing things, understanding a little more." Morty stepped back, noticing the subtle changes in her posture, the calmness that radiated from her like sunlight through clouds. You feel different," he said softly. Like you've stretched into something new." Summer nodded, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Yeah, I think I've realized that growing up isn't about rushing. It isn't about winning or being first, or even knowing everything. It's about noticing. It's about quiet stretches like you do, Morty." Morty felt his chest hum softly, the familiar pull of understanding spreading warmth through him. "So, you're saying it's okay to go slow? To notice things, even if the world seems loud and fast?" Summer smiled faintly, sitting on the edge of a workbench. "Exactly. And it's okay to make mistakes, to bend, to stretch, and even to rest. That's part of the rhythm. The universe has its rhythm, Morty, and we just have to find ours within it." Rick emerged from the shadows of the garage, leaning against a wall with his usual grin, though softer this time. "Finally. Took you long enough, Summer. But hey, welcome back. Looks like you've been paying attention to the quiet parts, huh?" Summer laughed softly, a sound that was both light and deep. "Yeah, quiet parts matter, Rick. Sometimes more than anything else." Morty nodded, feeling the familiar stretch of empathy fold gently into warmth. He realized that Summer's return wasn't just about her coming back from somewhere physically. It was about her returning with presence, with understanding, with a softness that resonated with his own growth. They spent the next few hours quietly together, sharing stories of what they had experienced while apart. Summer spoke of distant worlds, silent festivals, and small gestures of care she had witnessed along the way. Morty shared his own reflections, the stretches of empathy he had felt, and the lessons he had learned from noticing the quiet, the forgotten, the overlooked. Rick listened in silence more than usual, letting the siblings' conversation unfold. For once, he didn't interrupt with sarcasm or impatience. He merely observed, occasionally nodding, as if absorbing the lessons himself. Morty turned to Summer, eyes wide. You really understand now, don't you? The stretching, the noticing. It's not about fixing everything or being perfect. It's about being present." Summer nodded slowly. "Exactly, Morty, and you've been doing it all along. That's why the cosmic heads appeared to you, why the lessons unfolded the way they did. You've been practicing the quiet stretches, the hum of empathy, the noticing of small lights. That's the magic. Morty exhaled, letting the warmth settle in his chest. I guess growing up isn't about rushing after some big adventure. It's about noticing, carrying, and letting things flow, like we're part of something bigger. Summer's eyes softened. And sometimes that bigger thing is us noticing, leaning, and remembering. Even small acts ripple farther than we imagine. The quiet stretches we carry, they matter. Rick, finally speaking, voice low and soft, said, "Yeah, that's the secret. Not the gadgets, not the portals, not the fancy experiments. Just noticing, just stretching into connection. You two get it now." Morty smiled, feeling the hum in his chest resonate with something larger than himself. Summer nudged him gently. "You know, Morty, sometimes I think people get lost chasing the flashy stuff, the loud adventures. But the real growth, the quiet magic, it's in the stretches we make, the people we notice, the love we carry without making a scene." Morty nodded, feeling tears prick the corner of his eyes. Not sadness, not grief, but awe, wonder, and a soft exhale of relief. "Yeah, I get it. And I'm glad you're back. Not just here, but, really back." Summer smiled again, resting her hand on his shoulder. "Me too, Morty. Me too." They stayed together as the garage shifted from day to evening, the light fading softly, the hum of distant dimensions wrapping around them. Morty realized that growing up, stretching into understanding and noticing the quiet moments wasn't a race or a checklist. It was a rhythm, a breath, a stretch, a series of small, gentle acts that carried the weight of connection and memory. He thought of the cosmic heads, drifting silently in the vast night sky, their presence a mirror to the stretches, the noticing, the quiet love he carried. He realized that Summer's return, her quiet wisdom and her understanding of the rhythm were part of the same resonance. Morty whispered softly, almost to himself, "We're not alone." Not really. Even when we're apart, even when things fade, even when the stars rest, we're part of something bigger, and we carry it. Summer nodded, eyes reflecting the faint light of the garage and the fading sky. "Exactly. And that's enough. That's all we really need." Rick finally straightened, voice quiet, almost tender. "All right, kids. Enough reflection for one day. But don't forget it. The stretches, the noticing, the hum, it's everything. Even the cosmic heads would nod if they could." Morty laughed softly, a sound of wonder and warmth. "I'll remember, Rick, and I'll keep noticing. And stretching and carrying." Summer reached over, taking his hand briefly. "And I'll notice with you, Morty. That's the point, isn't it? We don't have to do it alone." Morty nodded, heart full, chest stretching gently into warmth. For once the world didn't feel overwhelming. The vast universe, the infinite possibilities, the quiet hum of memory and care. It all felt like home. He whispered softly, almost a lullaby to himself. "We're here. We're noticing. We're carrying. And somewhere the universe hums with us. And somewhere, far above, the cosmic heads drifted, witnessing the quiet return, the gentle presence, the stretches of empathy, and the tender resonance of a sister and brother reunited. And they hummed quietly, a song of acknowledgement and love. Morty felt the stretch in his chest ease completely, folding softly into warmth and understanding. He whispered again, almost to the stars themselves, "Thanks for noticing. Thanks for letting me notice. And even when we're apart, we're still part of the quiet hum." And somewhere in the infinite night, Morty and Summer rested, breathing in the soft rhythm of connection, presence, and the gentle lessons of noticing and carrying. The portal shimmered open, spilling silver light into the quiet street outside Rick's garage. Morty stepped through first, feeling a pull in his chest, the familiar stretch of empathy tinged with anticipation. Beside him, Rick moved silently, his hands tucked into his lab coat pockets, eyes scanning the horizon as if reading a story only he could see. Before them stood a peculiar house, unlike anything Morty had ever encountered. It was tall and narrow, with dozens of windows scattered irregularly across its walls. Some were square, others round, and a few triangular. Each window glimmered faintly, as though lit from within by a soft memory. The air hummed with quiet energy, carrying the faint scent of old pages, wood polish, and something indefinably nostalgic. "Welcome," Rick said softly, voice unusually calm. This is the house of windows. Each one shows a memory. Yours, mine, sometimes neither. You don't have to understand it all, just notice. Morty tilted his head, eyes wide. A house of memories? Rick nodded. Exactly. But be careful. Some memories are quiet, some loud, some soft. You can walk past them or step inside. Morty took a cautious step forward, feeling the gentle hum of the house wrap around him. The first window he approached was square, low to the ground and glimmered with faint golden light. He pressed his hand against it and immediately felt warmth wash over him. The window showed a younger version of himself, sitting on the floor of his room looking up at the night sky through his window. The cosmic heads drifted faintly in the distance, ghostly and immense. He watched quietly, noticing the awe on his younger self's face, the small stretch of wonder in his chest even then. Morty felt a familiar tug in his own chest, a stretch of empathy folding back on itself, and whispered softly, I remember you. I remember all of it. Rick moved beside him, hand resting lightly on his shoulder. Not all windows are comfortable, Morty. Some are echoes. Some are lessons. Some are reminders of what you carried and what you left behind. Morty nodded, moving to a round window higher up. He stretched slightly, the familiar pull in his chest helping him reach. Inside he saw a memory of Summer, younger and impatient, arguing with him over something trivial. Yet the window showed more than the fight. It showed the small moments of care, the shared laughter afterward, the quiet bond that grew despite disagreements. Morty exhaled softly, chest stretching into warmth. Even arguments can carry something gentle, he murmured. Rick smiled faintly. Exactly. Memories aren't just moments. They're the stretches, the bends, the quiet acts that echo longer than the noise. Morty moved to another window, triangular this time, positioned at eye level for Rick. Inside, he saw Rick as a younger man, standing alone on a rocky cliff, staring at a strange alien sunset. His expression was quiet, reflective, lonely, yet patient. Morty felt the tug in his chest again, realizing that even Rick, with all his brilliance and bravado, carried stretches of empathy and moments of care that few could see. He whispered softly, I see you, Rick. Even when you don't say it. Rick's eyes softened, a faint tremor in his jaw. Thanks, Morty. That's rare. That's important. Sometimes noticing is the only way to honor what's been carried. They walked together through the hall, the windows opening into memories both familiar and strange. A festival of floating lights, where Morty helped an elderly traveler, a field of shoes left behind by unknown wanderers, a river humming lullabies as they drifted in a distant dimension. Each memory made the air vibrate softly, each window illuminating lessons, empathy, and small acts of care. Morty paused at a particularly large window. Inside he saw the girl who collected whispers, older now, writing messages in the air. She turned to him, silent, and traced a message that felt like a lullaby. You've noticed. You've carried. You've stretched without breaking. Morty felt his chest expand, the familiar stretch folding into a warm glow. I've tried, he whispered almost to himself. I've really tried. Summer came to his side. You have, Morty. You've noticed things most people don't. That's the real growth. That's the real magic. Rick motioned toward a narrow staircase leading upward. Some memories are higher up. You have to stretch a little more. Sometimes that's uncomfortable, but that's where you find the quiet truths. Morty climbed slowly, feeling the stretch in his chest deepen as he approached the next window. Inside, he saw himself comforting a child who asked why stars fade. He watched his own younger self, tentative but patient, bending toward the child's heart, offering a small, simple truth. Morty exhaled softly, realizing that even then he had been practicing the quiet acts of care, the stretches that would ripple outward far beyond what he could measure. Every memory here, every stretch, it's all part of you, Rick said quietly. Not power, not glory, not winning. Just noticing, just presence. You've been doing it all along. Morty nodded, a tear slipping down his cheek. I think I understand now. The stretches, the noticing, the care. It's all part of who I am. It's not a burden, it's connection. Summer smiled, resting her head lightly on his shoulder. Exactly. You're carrying love quietly, Morty. That's why the cosmic heads appeared, why we've been on these journeys. It's not about adventure. It's about presence. Rick finally spoke, voice low, reverent. Memories aren't just past events. They're stretches, lessons, acts of care, quiet love. And this house. This house is a reminder. Step through each window if you want, but remember, the stretch doesn't stop. It folds into who you are. Morty looked around the house, the windows glowing softly, each reflecting a lesson, a stretch, a memory of empathy and care. He realized that life, growing up and noticing others, weren't about speed or power or spectacle. It was about these quiet windows, the stretches that connect us and the presence that folds into every act of love. He whispered softly, "I'll carry it. All of it. Every stretch, every act, every quiet memory. I'll notice. I'll carry it forward." Summer nodded, squeezing his hand. "And I'll notice with you, Morty. That's what matters." Rick smiled faintly, leaning back against a wall. "Good. That's all anyone can do. Just notice. Just be present. Just stretch and carry." As the sun outside the house dipped low, painting the sky in shades of lavender and gold, Morty stepped back, chest warm, stretch folding softly into him. Each window shimmered faintly, carrying echoes of past lessons, small acts of care and quiet love. He felt the hum of the universe, the gentle pull of the cosmic heads above, and the soft resonance of presence all around him. Morty whispered again, softly, as if to the universe itself. "Thanks for noticing. Thanks for letting me notice. And even when memories fade, even when the windows close, I'll carry the stretches, the love, and the quiet hum." And somewhere far above in the infinite night, the cosmic heads drifted, observing quietly, witnessing the quiet presence, the gentle stretches, and the tender lessons of a boy and his family, learning how to carry love without breaking. The evening air shimmered with a soft, iridescent glow as Morty and Rick stepped out of the portal onto a quiet plateau. The sky above stretched infinitely, deepening from lavender to indigo, dotted with stars that flickered like distant whispers. Morty felt the familiar pull in his chest, a gentle stretch of empathy and wonder, tinged with anticipation. Rick gestured to the horizon. "Tonight, Morty, I'm going to show you something. Not a gadget, not a portal, not some flashy adventure. Something quieter, something bigger than both of us." Morty blinked, his chest humming softly. "Bigger? How quiet can bigger be?" Rick smirked faintly, but without his usual sarcasm. "Quiet enough to make you notice it. Big enough to make your chest stretch in ways you can't yet imagine. This is the Skyfold." Morty tilted his head, curiosity and a gentle nervousness curling together. "Skyfold?" Rick pointed to the horizon where the stars seemed to bend toward them, weaving faint threads of silver light across the dark expanse. "Yeah, Skyfold, if you stretch far enough, really far enough. You don't just reach the stars. You fold into them, blend into the fabric of the cosmos. That's your gift, Morty, not power, not control, belonging." Morty swallowed, feeling the familiar tug in his chest deepen. He had bent toward empathy, toward kindness, toward noticing small acts of care. He had stretched toward understanding, toward memories, toward the whispers of the cosmic heads, but this felt vast, almost impossible. Is it safe?" Morty asked softly, voice barely above a whisper. Rick's gaze softened. "It's not about safety, Morty. It's about noticing, being present, and letting the universe hold you. You're not alone. You never have been." Morty nodded slowly. He closed his eyes, inhaling deeply, feeling the pull in his chest unfold like a ribbon of warmth. He reached outward with his heart, his awareness, and gently, cautiously, when he began to stretch, the air seemed to fold around him, stars shifting slightly, their faint hum rising in resonance with his chest. Morty felt his senses expand, not painfully, but as if he were part of a melody that had always existed, only waiting for him to notice. The plateau beneath him faded, replaced by the gentle shimmer of interwoven starlight. Rick stepped beside him, hand on his shoulder. "That's it, Morty. Lean into it, stretch, fold, belong. You're not leaving yourself behind. You're adding yourself to everything." Morty's chest hummed in harmony with the stars. The familiar pull of empathy now felt like resonance, connecting him to every quiet act, every memory, every small stretch of care he had carried throughout his life. He felt the presence of the cosmic heads drifting above, observing silently, approving, encouraging. I can feel them," Morty whispered, voice trembling. "The cosmic heads, and everything we've seen, and everyone I've noticed. It's all Connected, Rick nodded. Exactly. That's the point, Morty. The stretches, the noticing, the quiet acts, they fold into the fabric of the universe. You've been practicing it all along. Now you see it. Summer appeared beside him, her expression soft and serene. That's beautiful, Morty. Being part of something bigger without losing yourself, that's rare. Morty's chest pulsed gently as he let the sensation deepen. He could feel his presence merging with the vastness, yet remaining distinctly himself, a stretch of empathy, memory, and quiet care folded into the stars themselves. He realized then that his gift wasn't simply noticing others. It was connecting them, preserving their small acts and carrying their echoes forward. I feel like I belong, Morty whispered. Not just here, not just now, but everywhere. In all the echoes, all the memories, all the quiet moments. Rick smiled faintly, a rare softness in his gaze. Belonging, Morty, that's what this is. Not being first, not being strongest, not being smartest. Just being. Folding yourself into the cosmos without losing yourself. That's the Skyfold. Morty leaned into the feeling, chest stretching into warmth, mind quiet yet aware. The cosmic heads shimmered faintly in the distance, drifting across the infinite night, their vast, silent faces reflecting the resonance of every act of care, every small stretch, every quiet notice he had carried. He remembered the child who asked why stars fade, the girl who collected whispers, the field of shoes, the river that sang lullabies. Every moment, every lesson, every act of presence folded into him, folding into the stars, folding into the universe. He was part of it all, yet entirely himself. Summer squeezed his hand lightly. You're not just noticing, Morty. You're folding, carrying, belonging. That's the real journey. The real gift. Morty exhaled softly, eyes glimmering as he reached further, stretching the pull in his chest into a gentle, encompassing resonance. He realized then that this was the culmination of everything he had learned. Empathy, memory, quiet acts, and presence. The Skyfold wasn't magic. It was noticing. It was care. It was love, quiet, patient, and infinite. Rick stepped back, watching, letting Morty stretch fully into the cosmos. See, that's all it takes. Just notice. Just stretch. Just belong, Morty whispered again, almost to the stars themselves. I'm part of it. I see it, I feel it. I'll carry it. The sky shimmered around him, stars folding gently like soft fabric. The hum of the cosmic heads rose faintly, a lullaby of presence, memory, and care. Morty felt a final, gentle pull in his chest, folding into a warmth that was both infinite and intimate. He exhaled fully, eyes closing, chest softening. Thanks for letting me notice, for letting me stretch, for letting me belong. Summer leaned her head lightly on his shoulder. And we'll notice with you, Morty. Always. Rick straightened, voice quiet, reverent. That's it, Morty. That's all anyone can do. Stretch, notice, fold, belong. That's the quiet adventure of life. Morty felt the pull ease completely. Warmth settling in, stretch folding into stillness. He imagined the cosmic heads drifting above, the stars shimmering, the universe humming with echoes of care, love, and quiet presence. He realized that the Skyfold wasn't just a moment. It was a rhythm, a pattern, a lifelong stretch into belonging. He whispered softly, almost a lullaby. Thanks for noticing. Thanks for letting me notice. And somewhere, I'm folded into the stars, and somewhere, far above in the silent cosmos, the cosmic heads watched, humming quietly, approving, carrying the resonance of a boy who had bent, noticed, and loved without breaking, and a grandfather who had quietly taught him how. The air shimmered faintly, carrying the scent of wildflowers and distant stars. Morty stepped through a portal alone this time, heart still warm from the Skyfold, chest stretched gently with the quiet resonance of belonging. The plateau below was bathed in soft moonlight, silver rippling across the grass, as if the world itself had exhaled. A familiar presence awaited him. The girl who collected whispers, older now, stood near a small stream that sang softly as if echoing the hum of the cosmos. Her hair glimmered faintly in the moonlight, and her eyes held the same gentle curiosity Morty remembered. But now they carried the calm of experience, of understanding, Morty, she whispered softly, voice blending with the hum of the night. I've been waiting, Morty smiled, stepping closer. I've missed you. I've thought about you a lot, she nodded, glancing at the stars reflected in the stream. I've been here watching, listening, And now I have something for you. One last message. Morty felt a familiar pull in his chest, the gentle stretch of empathy and anticipation mingling with awe. He knelt beside her, letting the quiet of the night wrap around them. She lifted her hands, tracing delicate patterns in the air. Faint glimmers of light followed her movements, shaping themselves into letters that shimmered softly. Morty leaned in, feeling each whisper, each luminous word, as if they resonated not just in sight but in heart. The message unfolded slowly. You've noticed. You've carried. You've stretched without breaking. You belong, always. Morty exhaled softly, chest folding into warmth. The familiar tug of empathy softened, replaced by the quiet glow of recognition, presence and acceptance. I understand, he whispered. I really do, the girl smiled faintly. Not everything can be understood, Morty. Some things are meant to be felt. Some truths are carried in silence. Morty nodded, realizing the depth of what she said. He thought of the child who asked why stars fade, the river that sang, the village of light steps, and the cosmic heads drifting silently in the infinite sky. Every act, every stretch, every quiet notice was part of the same resonance folding into the universe like a gentle lullaby. I think I've learned that noticing, caring and being present, that's all that matters, Morty murmured. It's enough to bend, to stretch, to carry, and not break, she nodded, eyes reflecting the stars above. Exactly. And you've done it well. That's why the cosmic heads appeared. That's why Rick, Summer, and all the quiet moments mattered. They're echoes of the same song, and now you can carry it forward. Morty watched the glimmering shapes of her whispers dissolve into the night, leaving faint trails of light that mingled with the stars. The hum of the universe rose gently, carrying echoes of past lessons, acts of care, and quiet love. He felt the stretch in his chest fold into a tender warmth, a reminder that he was part of something vast, infinite and gentle. I'll remember, Morty whispered. And I'll carry it. Every quiet stretch, every act of noticing. I'll fold them into the stars, into the universe, into life. The girl smiled faintly, reaching out to touch his shoulder. And somewhere, Morty, even when you forget, the whispers will remember you. They always do. Rick appeared quietly behind them, voice soft, reverent. Morty, this is the end of the lullaby, at least for now. Not an ending, not a conclusion, just reflection. You've carried, noticed, and folded yourself into the quiet hum of the universe. That's everything. Summer stepped forward as well, her presence calm and steady. And we'll be here, Morty, not to guide, not to instruct, just to notice alongside you. That's what matters. Morty exhaled fully, letting the warmth settle in his chest. He looked up at the sky, faintly seeing the cosmic heads drifting, enormous and gentle, their vast silent faces reflecting the resonance of every act he had carried, every stretch he had made, every moment he had noticed. He whispered softly, almost a lullaby to himself. Thanks for noticing. Thanks for letting me notice. And even when the night grows quiet and the stars fade, I'll carry the hum. The girl's eyes shimmered, her voice blending with the faint hum of the universe. And somewhere, Morty, somewhere in the quiet, you'll find the echoes of everything you've carried. The memories, the love, the stretches, they're yours to keep. Morty felt the final tug of empathy fold softly into a quiet glow of understanding. He realized then that the last lullaby wasn't just hers, or the cosmic heads, or even Rick's lessons. It was the resonance of every small act, every quiet stretch, every moment of noticing that formed the invisible threads connecting him to the universe, to life, and to everyone he had loved and observed. He smiled faintly, chest humming softly. I understand now, I belong, and I'll carry it forward. Rick, Summer, and the girl stepped back, allowing Morty to sit alone by the stream for a while. He closed his eyes, listening to the soft melody of water, the hum of distant stars, the echoes of the cosmic heads, and the whispers of memory and care. The night wrapped around him gently, a cocoon of warmth and quiet reflection. Morty whispered one last time, Thanks for spending this time with me. Thanks for letting me notice. And everything is going to be okay. The girl nodded, fading softly into the night, leaving only the faint shimmer of her whispers. The stars hummed gently, cosmic heads drifting in the distance, carrying the quiet lullaby of presence, care, and love across the universe. Morty leaned back, eyes on the sky, chest soft and warm. He knew now that every act of noticing, every stretch of empathy, every quiet moment of care would ripple outward, fold into the cosmos, and echo endlessly. And somewhere even now Rick is still out there, resting in his own strange way. Morty too dreaming in the stars. He exhaled slowly, a soft, complete sigh of reflection and peace, folding the hum of the universe into his chest and letting it settle. The night stretched wide above them, a velvet canopy scattered with stars, each one pulsing faintly as though breathing in quiet rhythm with the universe. Morty and Rick sat side by side on a gentle hill, the grass brushing against their ankles, warm and soft from the day's lingering light. The air carried the faint scent of distant worlds, of quiet rivers and unseen meadows, and the gentle hum of the cosmos threading softly through the night. Morty tilted his head, eyes tracing the faint shimmer of the distant cosmic heads as they drifted ever so slowly across the horizon. Their immense silent faces were nearly gone now, fading into the night, yet their presence lingered in the soft pull of Morty's chest, the gentle resonance that had followed him through countless stretches. Quiet acts and whispered lessons. Rick's voice broke the silence, low and calm, almost reverent. "See them, Morty. They're leaving for now, but the hum stays. That's the important part. Not the spectacle, not the sight, the hum, the quiet awareness that stretches between everything. That's what matters." Morty nodded, chest humming softly, the familiar stretch folding into warmth. I understand, Rick. It's not about seeing them. It's about feeling them. Feeling everything we've carried, everything we've noticed. Rick leaned back, hands supporting him on the grass, eyes fixed on the sky. Exactly. You've been practicing the quiet stretches all along. Empathy, noticing, small acts. Every little thing folds into the fabric of the universe. That's your real journey, Morty. Not flashy adventures, not big victories, just presence. Morty exhaled, soft and steady, letting the warmth settle in his chest. He thought of every step he had taken, every stretch he had made. The girl who collected whispers, the river that sang, the village of light steps, the child who asked why stars fade, the house of windows, the Skyfold moment. Every memory, every act, every quiet notice folded gently into him, threading into the night sky like faint ribbons of light. Summer appeared quietly beside them, settling into the soft grass with a sigh. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" she whispered, voice blending with the hum of distant stars, the quietness, the stretches, the way everything folds together. Not in chaos, not in noise, but in calm. Morty smiled softly, letting the words sink into the warm glow in his chest. "Yeah, I think I finally get it. The cosmic heads, the memories, the stretches, they're all love, quiet love, patient, infinite love." Summer nodded, her eyes reflecting the faint shimmer of the last drifting heads. "And we can carry it, Morty. We can fold it into our hearts, into the world, into the next quiet act of care." Rick reached over, resting a hand on Morty's shoulder. "That's right, Morty. The real power isn't in portals, inventions, or multiversal escapades. It's in noticing, carrying, folding, and being, quietly, patiently, without expectation. That's how you bend without breaking, how you stretch without losing yourself. That's the hum of life." Morty's chest pulsed softly, the familiar stretch expanding into a gentle warmth. He thought of the last lullaby, of the whispers written in the air by the girl, of summer's return, of the house of windows, of the Skyfold moment. He realized then that all the quiet lessons, all the small stretches of presence, were threads weaving through his life, the lives around him, and the vastness of the universe itself. He tilted his head toward the horizon, eyes following the faint shimmer where the cosmic heads had been. "I feel them, Rick, even when they're gone. Even when we can't see them. I feel them. And I feel everything we've carried." Rick's lips curved into a faint smile, unusually soft. "That's the point, Morty. The exhale, the fold, the quiet hum, it stays. Even when the spectacle fades, even when the stars blink. That's what you carry with you." Morty exhaled fully, a gentle sigh of reflection, warmth folding into his chest. He imagined the voices of past lessons, of quiet acts of empathy, of stretches of care weaving into the hum of the universe, the cosmic heads, the memories, the whispers, the rivers, the stars. All of it was resonance, echoing softly across infinite space. Summer leaned her head against his shoulder. You've grown, Morty, not in loud ways, not in victories or recognition, but quietly, beautifully. You notice, you care, you stretch, and that's everything. Morty felt the warmth deepen, the stretch folding into him fully. I think I finally understand. Belonging isn't about being in one place or winning. It's about folding into the universe, noticing, carrying, being present. That's how we belong. Rick nodded, eyes on the faint horizon. Exactly. And now you know. Every act of care, every stretch, every noticing, it folds into the fabric of existence, quietly, patiently, eternally. That's the exhale of stars. Morty whispered again, voice soft as the night air. Thanks for noticing. Thanks for letting me notice, and thanks for showing me how to carry it all. Summer squeezed his hand gently. And we'll carry it with you, Morty. Quietly, patiently, in the hum of the universe. Morty exhaled, chest softening, the warmth settling fully into him. The night sky stretched above, calm and infinite, and for a long while none of them spoke. They simply breathed, felt, and noticed the quiet resonance of existence, the gentle folds of love, memory, and presence. He whispered one final time, as though to the stars themselves. And somewhere, even now, Rick is still out there, resting in his own strange way. Morty, too, dreaming in the stars. The cosmic heads had vanished completely, leaving only a faint hum in the distance, a soft vibration that threaded through the hill, the night and the hearts of those who had noticed. The hum was not loud, not urgent, but infinite in its patience, quiet in its wisdom, and tender in its care. Morty tilted his head back, eyes tracing the infinite sky, chest warm, stretch folded into stillness. He felt the hum, the fold, the quiet resonance of life, and he understood fully. Noticing, stretching, and carrying were the quietest forms of heroism. And in the soft glow of night, he knew he belonged. He exhaled once more, fully and completely, a soft sigh that carried through the plateau, into the stars, and out across the infinite universe. As the night hummed quietly across the hills, the stars folding softly into themselves, Morty and Rick sat together in silence. The cosmic heads had drifted far away, leaving only a gentle resonance that threaded through the universe, carrying every quiet act, every stretch of empathy, every moment of noticing. Morty breathed in the warmth of presence, of memory, of care. He realized that life's quiet stretches, the soft acts of love, the patience, the noticing, were the threads that connected him to the cosmos, to his family, and to everyone who had ever left a mark on his heart. Rick placed a hand on his shoulder, soft and steady. Remember, Morty, not all power comes from invention or adventure. Some of the greatest strength lies in noticing, carrying, and folding yourself into the quiet hum of the universe. That's how you belong. Summer rested her head lightly on his shoulder, and somewhere, even in the silence, our presence folds together. We stretch, we notice, we care, and it's enough. Morty exhaled fully, letting the warmth settle, the stretch fold completely into stillness. He looked up at the sky one last time, tracing faint trails where the cosmic heads had been, feeling their gentle hum in his chest. And somewhere, even now, Rick is still out there, resting in his own strange way. Morty, too, dreaming in the stars. A quiet smile touched his lips. The night, the universe, the hum, the echoes of every act of care, they were all part of him now, folded gently into the infinite. Thanks for spending this time with us. Sleep well. Everything's going to be okay, man. And with that, he stretched into the stars. Thanks for spending this time with us. Sleep well. Everything's going to be okay, man.